Nathan Pike's calloused hand froze mid-air, inches from Tala Redbird's bare shoulder. The Apache woman, 6 feet of coiled muscle and midnight braided defiance, smiled slow and dangerous. "Let me touch you there," he'd whispered, voice cracking with need. Her knife sang from its sheath. "Your body makes choices your mouth hasn't earned." She breathed, blade steady against his trembling wrist. The auction square fell silent. Blood pooled where iron shackles had bit her ankles. This wasn't romance, this was reckoning. Stay with us until the very end and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled across the world. The Arizona sun hammered Red Butte's dusty main street like a blacksmith working iron, and Nathan Pike was melting right along with it. His boots kicked up copper-colored dust as he trudged past the Copper Bell Saloon, sweat plastering his cotton shirt to shoulders that'd never fill out no matter how many fence posts he hauled. At 5'6" in his Sunday boots, Nathan had learned early that a man's measure wasn't taken in inches, it was taken in choices. He was thinking about water cold and clean. From the mission well when the crowd's roar stopped him dead. The auction square, usually home to livestock sales and farm equipment, was packed shoulder to shoulder with miners, ranch hands, and shopkeepers. But the platform didn't hold cattle today. It held a woman. Nathan's cartographer's eyes took in the scene with the precision he usually reserved for mapping creek beds and property lines. The woman was tall, intimidatingly so, with Apache features sharp enough to cut glass and long black hair that someone had tried to braid into submission but failed. Her buckskin dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing skin that bore the fresh marks of rope burns. Shackles circled her ankles, the chains bolted to the platform itself. But what stopped Nathan's breath wasn't her bondage, it was her eyes. Obsidian dark and absolutely unbroken, they swept across the crowd with the cold assessment of a predator counting prey. "Gentlemen." The voice belonged to Harlan Doak, a bounty broker who'd slithered into Red Butte 3 months prior, like a snake looking for shade. He wore a city suit gone shabby at the edges, and his smile revealed teeth too white to be honest. "By the authority vested in me by the Territorial Marshal's Office, I present to you one Tala Redbird, wanted for crimes against settlers' theft of livestock and general savagery unbecoming of civilized lands." Nathan's jaw tightened. He'd drawn maps for half the territory, and he knew the law. This wasn't how warrants worked. The federal bounty Doak continued, pulling a document from his vest with theatrical flourish. "Has been satisfied by her capture, but territorial law allows for compensatory distribution." His smile widened. "Gentlemen, make your claims." The crowd surged forward and Nathan felt his stomach turn. This wasn't justice, this was sanctioned slavery dressed up in legal language. A thick-armed miner pushed to the front. "I'll take her, got a mine, needs working, and I reckon she's strong enough. She's not livestock, Briggs." The voice cut through the noise like a cavalry saber. Nathan turned to see a uniformed figure shouldering through the crowd, Captain Royce Briggs of the 7th Cavalry, all polished brass and cold fury. But the fury wasn't directed at Doak. It was fixed on Tala with the intensity of something personal. "Actually," Captain Doak said smoothly, "according to this warrant, she's exactly that. Chattel seized in the course of lawful apprehension." He tapped the document. "All proper and legal." Nathan's hands clenched. He'd spent 3 years apprenticing under a surveyor who'd taught him to spot forged property deeds from 20 paces. That paper in Doak's hand, something about the seal caught wrong in the desert light. "I claim right of first purchase," Briggs announced, his hand moving to his service revolver. "I've got personal business with this one." Tala spoke for the first time, her voice carrying despite its quietness. "Royce Briggs." Each word was precisely measured, like rounds being loaded into a chamber. "Still chasing ghosts. Your brother made his choice at Canyon de Shelley. I made mine." Briggs's face went purple. You murdered. I survived. Tala's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. He didn't respect boundaries either. The captain lunged forward, hand raised, and Nathan Pike moved without thinking. His small frame intercepted Briggs' arm, deflecting the blow away from Tala. The crowd gasped. Nathan Pike, quiet Nathan mapmaker. Nathan, nobody. Nathan had just laid hands on a cavalry officer. "Sir," Nathan said, voice steady despite his racing heart. "I don't know what happened at Canyon de Chelly, but I know the law. If she's accused of crimes, she gets a trial. If she's property, she gets sold proper. You can't have it both ways." Briggs's eyes narrowed. "Boy, you just bought yourself a world of trouble." "Maybe." Nathan turned to face the platform, addressing Doak directly. "But I'm making a claim, too. How much for her warrant?" The crowd murmured. Doak's smile flickered with calculation. "The bounty's been paid, Pike, but compensatory ownership, let's say $200. Nathan's entire savings was $87 and change. But he'd learned poker from a circuit judge, and he knew how to read a room. "Show me the warrant first. Full inspection." "The seal's right there." "Show me." Nathan's voice carried a quality that made even Briggs pause. It was the tone of a man who'd found his line and wouldn't be moved from it. Doak hesitated just a fraction of a second, but Nathan caught it. The broker descended from the platform, warrant in hand, moving close enough that Nathan could smell cheap whiskey and expensive lies. The document looked official at first glance. Territorial Marshal's letterhead, proper formatting descriptions of alleged crimes. But Nathan's eyes, trained to catch survey markers and property frauds, fixed on the seal. The territorial seal was supposed to have 13 rays emanating from the central star representing the original counties. This one had 12. "This is a forgery," Nathan said quietly. The crowd's murmur shifted from curiosity to something darker. Doak's smile never wavered, but his hand slid toward his coat. "That's a serious accusation, boy." "Nathan's right." A new voice joined the fray, Elias Crow, editor of the Red Butte Gazette, pushing through with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes magnified by wire-rimmed spectacles. "I've published every territorial warrant for 3 years. That seal's wrong." "I'll vouch for its authenticity," Briggs cut in. As an officer with a personal grudge," came a woman's voice, soft but unyielding. Maria Ortega, the mission nurse, stepped into the clearing, her simple dress and medicine bag, marking her as someone who dealt in healing, not harm. "I've treated 3 girls this month who disappeared after Doak claimed similar warrants, all Apache. All found their way back, beaten and broken." The crowd's energy was shifting, uncertainty rippling through the pressed bodies. Nathan felt it like weather changing the moment before a storm, when the air itself holds its breath. Doak's hand emerged from his coat, holding a derringer, small, nasty, pointed at Nathan's chest. "The warrant stands and the sale proceeds." Tala moved. The chains on her ankles had maybe 18 inches of play, but she made it enough. Her legs swept out in a move that seemed to defy physics, hooking the platform's support beam and using it as leverage to swing her body horizontal. Her free leg caught Doak's gun hand with her heel, and the derringer went spinning into the dust. She settled back onto the platform as if nothing had happened, chains clinking softly. "He was boring me," she said simply. The crowd exploded into chaos. Some men rushed for the fallen gun, others backed away. Briggs barked orders to soldiers Nathan hadn't noticed before, positioned at the square's edges. Nathan stood frozen, watching Tala with something like awe. "Enough!" The sheriff, old William Cade, who'd kept Red Butte peaceful through 3 different territorial governors, fired his shotgun into the air. The crowd stilled. "Doak, you'll submit that warrant to my office for verification. Pike, Crow, Nurse, Ortega, you'll make your formal challenges in writing by sundown. Captain Briggs, your men stand down or answer to the territorial governor." Doak's face was murderous, but he managed a tight nod. Fine, but the prisoner stays secured until verification completes. She stays in a cell, Cade corrected, with proper conditions, and anyone who wants to inspect the merchandise can inspect the inside of my jail instead. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed at being denied their spectacle. Nathan watched Tala being unlocked from the platform and fitted with proper transport chains. As the deputy led her past, she stopped, turned those obsidian eyes on Nathan. "Why?" she asked simply. Nathan met her gaze. Her body, her choice. That's what my mother taught me. Figured it applied to more than just courting. Something flickered across Tala's face, not gratitude, nothing so simple. More like recognition. Your mother taught you well, little mapmaker. Try to keep that teaching alive. This territory eats good lessons. Then she was gone, led toward the sheriff's office with the kind of dignity that made the chains look like jewelry she'd chosen to wear. The next hours blurred together in a haze of legal maneuvering and careful documentation. Nathan Crow and Maria met in the Gazette's office, a cramped space that smelled of ink and coffee gone bitter with age. The seals definitely forged, Crow confirmed, examining the warrant under his printer's loupe. But more interesting, look at the signature. That's not Marshal Davidson's hand. I've printed 50 of his actual warrants. Maria produced a worn ledger from her medicine bag. The girls I mentioned, I kept records. Dates, they disappeared. Dates, they returned. Doak arrived in Red Butte exactly 2 weeks before the first disappearance. Nathan spread out his survey maps across Crow's desk, his cartographer's brain making connections. 3 months ago, Doak shows up. 2 weeks later, first girl vanishes. Look at the pattern. Every disappearance coincides with freight wagon routes heading east. Human trafficking, Maria said quietly. Using fake warrants to legitimize kidnapping. But why? Nathan traced the freight routes with his finger. These wagons go to mining camps, sure, but also... His finger stopped. Rail construction sites. The new Southern Line. Crow's eyes widened behind his spectacles. The Territorial Expansion Project. They need labor, and they're not particular about how they get it. We need more proof, Nathan said. The seal forgery might get the warrant thrown out, but it won't stop Doak. He'll just get a real one or disappear Tala before we can challenge it. Then we get it tonight. Tala's voice came from the doorway, and all 3 conspirators jumped. She stood there, lockpick in hand, still wearing transport chains, but clearly not contained by them. Behind her, looking sheepish, was Deputy Mills, younger than Nathan, and currently sporting a growing bruise on his jaw. She didn't hurt me bad, Mills said quickly, and she's right. Doak's already talking to Briggs about a transfer order. They'll move her by morning. Nathan stared at Tala. You escaped. I liberated myself, she corrected, stepping into the office and closing the door. Your sheriff's calm was insultingly easy, but I'm not running, not yet. She fixed Nathan with that obsidian stare. You stood up for me. Why? I told you, no. She moved closer, and Nathan was struck again by her sheer physical presence. Men say pretty words all the time. Why did you actually do it? Nathan took a breath. Truth was easier than lies. His mother had taught him that too. 3 years ago, I was surveying near Canyon de Chelly. Found a young woman Apache barely alive. She'd been... He struggled with the words. Used. Broken. Left to die. I got her to the mission, but she never spoke again. Never looked anyone in the eye again. And I thought, if I'd been there earlier, if someone had just stood up and said no, maybe you carry guilt for things you didn't do, Tala observed. That's both noble and stupid. Maybe, but I was there today. I could say no today. Something in Tala's expression shifted, a fortress door, opening just a crack. The girl at Canyon de Chelly. She was my cousin, running deer. The room went silent. Briggs' brother commanded the patrol that found her. Tala continued, her voice carrying the weight of old pain. She fought back. He didn't like that. When I found her, she told me everything before she... Tala's hands clenched. I tracked him, confronted him. He drew first. I was faster. Self-defense, Maria said firmly, not according to his brother. Tala's smile was bitter. Royce Briggs has been hunting me for 3 years, using military resources, bending regulations, waiting for his chance. Doak gave him that chance. So this is personal for Briggs, Crow said, making notes. But Doak's motive is profit. They're using each other, which means their alliance is fragile. Nathan said his strategic mind usually applied to surveying challenges, engaging with the problem. We break the profit motive, Briggs loses his leverage. Tala studied him with new interest. You think like a scout. Small man, but you see the terrain. I map it, Nathan corrected, which means I know every building, every route, every hidden corner of this town. If we're going to prove Doak's running a trafficking operation, we need to find his records. His real records. His office is above the Lucky Strike, Mills offered, but it's locked tighter than the bank. Nothing's locked if you know how to look, Tala said. She turned to Nathan. You map the approach. I'll handle the entry, but I work alone. No. The word came out before Nathan could think better of it. Tala's eyebrow raised. No, not alone. You don't know the building layout, the sightlines, the patrol routes. I do. Nathan pulled out a map because of course he had a map of downtown Red Butte's commercial district, and you need someone on the ground to run interference if it goes wrong. He's right, Maria added. Tala, you're wanted. If you're seen, it's over. But Nathan can be in that alley legitimately. He surveys for half the businesses there. Tala looked at Nathan for a long moment. I don't need protection, little mapmaker. Good, because I'm not offering it. Nathan met her eyes. I'm offering partnership, your skills, my knowledge, equal contribution, equal risk. Equal risk. Tala laughed, but there was something almost warm in it. You'd die in 30 seconds if Doak's men caught you. Then you'd better make sure they don't catch me. Crow cleared his throat. If you two are finished negotiating, we have perhaps 4 hours until Doak realizes his prisoner is missing. I suggest we use them wisely. The night came down on Red Butte like a velvet curtain, stars scattered across the desert sky with the careless abundance of a gambler's chips. Nathan and Tala moved through the shadows behind the Lucky Strike saloon, their footsteps silent on the packed earth. Nathan had provided her with a change of clothes, his spare surveying outfit rolled at the cuffs and cinched at the waist. It still hung loose on her frame, but it was anonymous. Forgettable. That was the point. There, Nathan whispered, pointing to an external staircase. 2nd floor east corner, Doak's office. Guards, one at the main entrance, but he drinks. By now he'll be on his 3rd whiskey. Nathan checked his pocket watch, a gift from his late father. In 4 minutes, the eastbound freight rolls through. Noise cover. Tala nodded, then paused. You're calm. Most men would be shaking. I am shaking, Nathan admitted, just doing it quietly. That earned him a quick smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. Then she was moving, flowing up the staircase like water finding its level lockpicks already in her hands. Nathan positioned himself at the alley's mouth, pocket watch. Open, counting seconds. The freight train's whistle echoed across the desert, right on schedule. The lock clicked open just as the train hit its loudest point. Tala slipped inside and Nathan followed, closing the door behind them. Doak's office was exactly what Nathan expected: cheap luxury hiding, cheaper ethics. Velvet curtains, a mahogany desk that was probably stolen, and file cabinets that promised secrets. You take the desk, Tala directed. I'll check the cabinets. They worked in synchronized silence, the kind of coordination that usually took months to develop, but sometimes arrived fully formed when necessity demanded it. Nathan's cartographer's hands sorted through papers with practiced efficiency, looking for patterns, connections, proof. He found it in a ledger hidden in a false drawer bottom. the kind of hiding place that seemed clever until someone who understood spatial dimensions started investigating. "Tala," he breathed. "Look at this." The ledger detailed a trafficking operation that made Nathan's blood run cold. Dates, names, ages, prices. 23 young women and girls over the past 3 months, sold to mining operations, rail construction camps, and Nathan's stomach turned private buyers. "There's a route map," he said, unfolding a document that matched his own survey work. "They're using the freight lines, but look, hidden stops, places where wagons could unload cargo without witnesses." Tala leaned over his shoulder, her breath warm against his ear. For a moment, Nathan was acutely aware of her closeness, the scent of sage and leather, the barely leashed power in her frame. Then her finger jabbed the map. "There, Dry Knife Basin. That's sacred ground, Apache burial sites. No one would look there because it's supposed to be protected." Her voice went hard. "They're desecrating the dead to hide their crimes. We need to copy this," Nathan said. "Take it to Sheriff Cade." The door crashed open. Doak stood there, Derringer raised 3 hired guns behind him. His smile was pure poison. "Looking for something, thieves?" Nathan's hand moved instinctively toward the pocket where he'd tucked the ledger. Doak's gun tracked the movement. "Give it here, boy, nice and slow." Tala shifted, placing herself slightly between Nathan and the guns. It was a subtle movement, almost unconscious, and Nathan felt something shift in his chest. "We know everything," Nathan said, stalling. "The trafficking, the fake warrants, the sacred ground violations. Sheriff Cade is currently enjoying a drink at the Copper Bell, where he'll stay for another hour thanks to a generous tab I'm buying." Doak stepped closer. "The ledger, now." Nathan's mind raced through options, mapping escape routes with the same precision he used for surveying. The window too high, too visible, the door blocked. The Tala moved like lightning, striking upward. Her hand caught Doak's wrist, twisting the Derringer away, while her other hand drove into his solar plexus. The broker folded like cheap paper, but the 3 guns behind him weren't slow. They raised rifles, and Nathan knew, with the cold certainty of a man reading his own map, they were out of time. Then the window exploded inward. Maria Ortega swung through on a rope that definitely hadn't been there minutes ago, her medicine bag forgotten in favor of a shotgun that looked almost comically large in her small hands. She fired once buckshot, punching into the ceiling above the gunmen's heads. "Next one's lower," she shouted. The confusion bought them 3 seconds. Tala used 2 of them to vault through the door, dragging Nathan with her. They hit the external staircase, running Maria's covering fire, keeping the gunmen pinned. "The map," Tala shouted as they descended. "Did you? Got it." Nathan patted his pocket. "But they know, we know now." They hit the ground running. Behind them, doors were slamming, voices shouting, the whole Lucky Strike coming alive with pursuit. Nathan's brain automatically mapped their route, left at the feed store, right through Morrison's yard, over the fence. A gunshot cracked past Nathan's ear so close he felt the heat. Tala's hand clamped on his collar, yanking him left as a second shot hit where he'd been. She was protecting him, Nathan realized, actually protecting him. This way, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward a narrow gap between buildings that didn't exist on any official map, but that he'd discovered while surveying property lines. They squeezed through Tala's larger frame, barely fitting. The gap led to a covered alley, then to the back of the general store, then Nathan's mental map clicking through options to the livery stable where his horse was already saddled for tomorrow's survey work. They burst into the stable and Nathan made a split-second decision. "Can you ride? Better than you walk," Tala shot back. Nathan grabbed his horse, a sturdy mare named Compass, and practically threw himself into the saddle. He extended a hand to Tala. She took it, swinging up behind him with the ease of someone who'd been born on horseback. Her arms wrapped around his waist, holding tight, and Nathan tried very hard not to think about the feel of her against his back, the trust implied in that grip. the way his heart was racing from more than just the chase. They burst from the stable at a gallop, Compass's hooves striking sparks from the night-shadowed street. Behind them, Doak's men were mounting up, and the hunt was on. The desert night swallowed them, like a vast, star-scattered mouth. Nathan gave Compass her head, trusting the mare's instincts and his own knowledge of the terrain. Beside him, no, behind him, pressed close, Tala's breathing was steady, controlled the breath of a warrior conserved for when it was needed. "Where are we going?" she asked, lips close to his ear, to be heard over hoofbeats. "Mission outpost," Nathan called back. "Maria will meet us there with evidence. Crow's probably already printing extra warrants, real ones, to distribute before Doak can suppress them. Smart, use the press as a weapon." Tala's grip tightened as Compass jumped a dry creek bed. "Your friends are resourceful." "They're your friends too now," Nathan said. "Or they want to be." "I don't have friends. I have—" She paused, and Nathan felt her reassessing. "I had allies, people who needed something from me or I from them, mutual benefit." "And what do you need from me?" The question hung in the night air, vast and vulnerable. Tala was silent for so long Nathan thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "I don't know yet, little mapmaker. That scares me more than Doak's guns." They rode in silence after that, but it was a different quality of silence, one that held question instead of barriers. The mission outpost appeared as a cluster of low adobe buildings, warm light spilling from windows like liquid gold. Nathan guided Compass to the stable, and they dismounted with the practiced coordination of riders who'd done this together 100 times instead of once. Maria was already there somehow, her shotgun traded back for her medicine bag. Elias Crow stood beside her, ink-stained and fierce, holding what looked like a dozen freshly printed broadsides. "Warrants," Crow announced, thrusting the papers at them, "for Harlan Doak and his associates. Charges include human trafficking, forgery, theft, and desecration of protected lands. I've sent copies to every town within 50 miles and to the territorial governor." "How?" Nathan asked, amazed. "Telegraph office stays open late when you're paying overtime," Crow said with a wry smile, and the operator's daughter was one of the girls who came back broken. Maria stepped forward, her eyes on Tala. "The children you saved from Dry Knife Basin, one of them talked. A girl named Swiftwater. She described the route, the wagons, everything. Her testimony corroborates the ledger." "Swiftwater," Tala repeated, and Nathan saw something crack in her controlled expression. Is she safe? Healing?" Maria's voice gentled. "She wants to see you, to thank you." "No." Tala's response was immediate, sharp. "She shouldn't thank me. I'm the reason she was there. If I'd been faster, smarter, if I'd seen Briggs and Doak's connection sooner." "You carry guilt for things you didn't do," Nathan said quietly, echoing her own words back to her. "Someone once told me that's both noble and stupid." Tala's obsidian eyes met his, and Nathan saw the fortress door open a little wider. "Touché, mapmaker." "There's more," Crow said, his excitement barely contained. "The telegraph operator found something in Doak's sent messages, coded references to a land acquisition project. I cross-referenced with territorial surveys, and Nathan, you need to see this." Crow spread out a survey map, not one of Nathan's, but an official territorial document showing proposed railway routes. Someone had marked an alternate of in red ink. "The official Southern Line route," Crow pointed to a black line, "goes straight through Apache lands, including sacred sites. But this alternate route," his finger traced the red line, "skirts the sacred grounds entirely. It's actually shorter and has better grade percentages for the rail." Nathan's cartographer brain engaged immediately. "So why not use the alternate?" "Because," Maria said quietly, "the official route goes through lands that Doak's consortium recently purchased from the territory, purchased using profits from human trafficking. If the rail uses those lands, the value increases tenfold." Land grab, Tala said flatly. They're desecrating sacred ground for profit and using stolen people to do it. And Briggs, Nathan asked. Promised a position with the railroad company, Crow revealed. Advancement pension legitimacy. All he had to do was use military resources to help capture criminal Apache use specifically and look the other way while Doak did the rest. Nathan felt the pieces clicking into place with the satisfying precision of a good survey triangulation. So if we can prove the alternate route is better, the land purchase becomes worthless, Tala finished. The money trail leads back to Doak, the trafficking gets exposed, and Briggs loses everything. There's just one problem, Maria said. We need a qualified surveyor to officially validate the alternate route. Someone territorial authorities will trust. All eyes turned to Nathan. Me! He laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. I'm just an apprentice. I haven't even taken my certification exam yet. But you've surveyed half this territory, Crow argued. Your maps are used by every land office from here to Santa Fe. Your work speaks for itself. Your work, Tala added, her hand surprisingly gentle on his shoulder, and your courage. You stood up in that square today. Stand up again now. Give them proof they can't ignore. Nathan looked at the map, at the route that could save lives and sacred ground, at the woman whose touch burned like desert sun and desert stars combined. He thought about the girl at Canyon de Shelley, about swift water, about all the voices that had been silenced by men who saw people as profit. I'll do it, he said, but I'll need to access the actual terrain, survey the alternate route, properly document every grade, every geological feature. That means going back into the field, Tala said, with Doak's men hunting us and Briggs using military resources. And time running out, Maria added. The Territorial Council votes on the final rail route in 3 days. Nathan pulled out his pocket watch. Nearly midnight. 3 days meant 72 hours. With proper planning, a good horse, and favorable weather, he could survey the alternate route in 48 hours, Tala said, reading his expression. If we move fast, sleep light, and trust each other completely. We, Nathan echoed. You think I'm letting you wander sacred ground alone? Tala's smile was sharp. Besides, you need someone who knows the land's secrets, not just its measurements. I'm Apache mapmaker. This territory is written in my bones. Then it's decided, Crow said. You two handle the survey. Maria and I will work on gathering more testimony, building the legal case. Meet us at Four Winds Plateau in 48 hours. That's where the Territorial Council convenes. They spent the next hour preparing. Maria provided medical supplies and dried food. Crow gave them copies of all the evidence wrapped in oilskin to protect from the elements. Nathan checked his surveying equipment with the meticulousness of a man whose life might depend on precise measurements. And Tala stood at the window looking out at the desert night, her silhouette sharp against the star-scattered darkness. Nathan approached her, careful to make noise, so she'd hear him coming. He'd learned that much about respecting a warrior's space. You don't have to do this. You could disappear into the territories. Be safe. Safe. Tala turned, and Nathan saw something raw in her expression. I've been running for 3 years, mapmaker. Running from Briggs, from memories, from the weight of everyone I couldn't save. Your teacher, the one who taught you about property deeds, what did they say about foundations? Nathan blinked at the non sequitur. That you can't build anything lasting on unstable ground. Exactly. Tala moved closer, and Nathan's breath caught. I'm tired of unstable ground, tired of running. You stood in that square and gave me the rarest thing a man has ever offered: respect without requirement. No ownership, no demands, just choice. That's just basic human decency. It's revolutionary, Tala corrected. In this world, for women like me, it's revolutionary. She reached out her calloused fingers, gentle on his cheek. So yes, little mapmaker with the giant spine, I'm doing this. Not because I have to, because I choose to. Nathan felt like he was standing on the edge of a canyon, that moment of weightlessness before the leap. When this is over, when the route is proven, and Doak's in custody and Briggs is court-martialed, what then? Then, Tala's smile softened into something that might have been hope. Then we see if a surveyor and a scout can map something neither of them has charted before. And what's that? Partnership without possession, closeness without cages, a future where, she traced the line of his jaw, where, let me touch you, is always a question, never a demand. Nathan's hand covered hers, pressing it to his cheek. I can map that territory. Good. Tala stepped back, the warrior returning, but something had shifted in her eyes. Because we start at dawn, and I don't go easy on slow cartographers. Dawn broke over Red Butte like a promise, the sky bleeding from purple to pink to gold. Nathan and Tala left the mission outpost on compass, riding double their surveying equipment secured in saddlebags that also held their future. The desert unfolded before them, vast and indifferent and achingly beautiful. Nathan had his maps, his instruments, his carefully honed skills. Tala had her knowledge, her warrior's instincts, her hard-won wisdom about survival and sacred ground. Together they had something neither had possessed, a lone hope that justice might actually resemble its definition, that the map they were drawing led somewhere worth reaching, that two people from different worlds could build a bridge stronger than the chasms between them. Behind them, Red Butte was waking to the news that everything had changed. Crow's broadsides were being read, Maria's testimonies were being heard, and somewhere in a fancy office, Harlan Doak was discovering that his carefully constructed empire was built on sand. Ahead lay the route, the alternate path that could save sacred ground, and prove that profit and ethics weren't enemies, but partners waiting to be introduced. 48 hours to survey, document, and return with proof. Nathan kicked compass into a steady lope, Tala's arms secure around his waist, her chin resting lightly on his shoulder as she pointed out landmarks invisible to his surveyor's eye but clear to her scout's vision. There, she said. See where the rock formation looks like a woman carrying water? That's the start of the sacred boundary. Nathan saw it barely, but he saw it, and he marked it on his map with the kind of precision that came from knowing that lines on paper could become lives saved, futures preserved, justice achieved. The sun climbed higher, the desert stretched wider, and two unlikely partners rode toward a confrontation that would test everything they'd built in one desperate night. Trust, courage, and the fragile, powerful belief that choice was the foundation on which all worthy things were constructed. The morning sun transformed the desert into a furnace of copper and gold, heat waves already shimmering off distant mesas like the territory itself was breathing. Nathan's surveying transit bounced against his hip as compass picked her way through a maze of arroyos that Tala navigated with the confidence of someone reading a familiar book. Stop here, Tala said, her breath warm against Nathan's neck. She slid from the horse with fluid grace, landing in a crouch that spoke of years moving through hostile terrain. This is where your alternate route needs to curve east to avoid the burial grounds. Nathan dismounted more carefully, his legs protesting the hours in the saddle. He pulled out his transit and notebook, squinting at the landscape with a surveyor's calculating eye. The grade looked promising, a gentle 2% slope that would be perfect for rail construction, but he needed measurements, not assumptions. How far do the burial grounds extend? He asked, setting up his equipment on a flat rock. Tala moved to stand beside him, her hand sweeping across the horizon. See that outcropping shaped like a hawk's wing? That's the northern boundary. South goes to the 3 standing stones there. You can barely make them out. East to the twisted juniper, west to... She stopped, her body going rigid. Riders, 3 of them, coming fast from the northwest. Nathan's hands stilled on the transit. Doak's men... No. Tala's voice carried a note he'd learned to recognize as danger. Military, and they're not on patrol, they're tracking. She was right. Within minutes, Nathan could see them too. 3 cavalry soldiers pushing their horses hard, following a trail that could only be Compass's hoofprints. At the lead rode a sergeant Nathan didn't recognize, but the 2 privates behind him looked young, uncertain. We can't outrun them, Nathan said, his mind already mapping their options. The terrain here was too open, too exposed, and if we try it confirms we're fugitives. You're not a fugitive. Tala corrected her hand, moving to the knife at her belt. But I am, in their eyes at least. The soldiers were close enough now that Nathan could see the sergeant's face, hard lines and harder eyes, the look of a man following orders he enjoyed too much. They pulled up 20 feet away, hands on their service revolvers. You there, the sergeant barked at Nathan. Step away from the woman. She's wanted by the territorial marshal. Nathan's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. Show me the warrant. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. Don't need to show you nothing, boy. Now step aside or be arrested for obstruction. Actually, Nathan said, pulling Crow's broadside from his pocket with deliberately slow movements, you do need a warrant. And according to this official publication from the Red Butte Gazette, all previous warrants for Tala Redbird have been nullified due to forgery. Furthermore, warrants have been issued for Harland Oak and his associates for trafficking crimes. The sergeant snatched the broadside, his face darkening as he read. One of the privates, barely 18 with freckles that made him look even younger, leaned over to look. Sarge, the kid said quietly, that's got the Gazette's seal. And look, territorial governor's office stamp on the bottom. Forgery, the sergeant spat. Briggs warned us they'd have fake documents. Captain Briggs, Tala said, stepping forward with her hands visible and empty, is the one who needs warning. His personal vendetta doesn't make for legal orders. Ask yourselves, why would a captain dedicate 3 years of military resources to hunting one woman? What's really driving this? The second private shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Nathan recognized the look, the expression of a man whose certainty was cracking. He pressed the advantage. I'm Nathan Pike, licensed surveyor's apprentice. This woman is my guide for a territorial land survey. We're on official business, documented and authorized. He pulled out his survey commission, slightly exaggerated in its authority, but real enough to pass inspection. If you interfere, you're obstructing territorial development. The freckled private spoke up. Sarge, maybe we should ride back, check with the captain. We check nothing, the sergeant snarled. Briggs wants her, we bring her. Dead or alive, he said. Didn't specify which. The sergeant's hand dropped to his revolver, and Nathan saw Tala's weight shift infinitesimally, preparing to move, to fight, to do whatever survival required. But 3 armed soldiers, even green ones, were odds that favored bullets over blades. Then Compass did something unexpected. The mare, who'd been standing quiet as a statue, suddenly whinnied and reared her hooves, flashing. The sergeant's horse spooked sideways, nearly throwing its rider. In the chaos of controlling their mounts, the soldiers' gun hands were occupied. Nathan didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed Tala's wrist, a question, not a command, and she nodded once. They ran. Behind them, the sergeant was shouting orders, but the terrain Tala led them into was a nightmare for the horses, rocky steep, threaded with crevices that could snap an ankle. They scrambled up a slope too sharp for mounted pursuit, their breath coming in gasps, stones skittering beneath their boots. Here, Tala hissed, pulling Nathan into a narrow slot canyon invisible until you were nearly inside it. They pressed against the rock-faced chests, heaving as the sounds of pursuit echoed around them. Lost them, Sarge. Keep looking. They couldn't have gone far. Nathan's mind raced. They'd bought time, but not much. The survey needed to continue, measurements needed to be taken, but they were hunted now, officially hunted by military forces. Tala's hand found his in the shadows, her grip tight. The young one, the freckled private, did you see his face when you mentioned Doak's trafficking? Nathan nodded, understanding her thought. He didn't know. He believed he was arresting a criminal, not helping a land grab. Belief can be changed, Tala said, especially when confronted with truth. But we need proof they can't ignore. They waited in the slot canyon until the sounds of search faded, then emerged into the brutal afternoon sun. Compass was waiting where they'd left her clever mare, and Nathan felt a surge of affection for the horse who'd just saved their lives. We continue the survey, Nathan decided, but we work fast, get the measurements we need before Briggs commits more resources. Tala swung onto Compass. Then we work through the night. I know this land in darkness as well as light. Better maybe. They rode hard for the next location. Nathan had marked a ridge that would provide sightlines for triangulation measurements. The sun crawled across the sky like a drunk spider, and Nathan worked with the focused intensity of a man racing against both time and tyranny. At each survey point, Tala kept watch, while Nathan took measurements. Elevation grade percentages, geological stability. All the data needed to prove the alternate route was superior. His notebook filled with numbers that would become maps, maps that would become proof, proof that would become justice, if they lived long enough to present it. The sun was setting when they reached a spring hidden among 3 standing stones, the southern boundary of the sacred burial grounds Tala had mentioned. Nathan was setting up his final measurement of the day when Tala suddenly grabbed his shoulder. "Down," she breathed. "Now." They dropped behind a boulder just as riders appeared on the eastern ridge. Not cavalry this time, these were Doak's men, 6 of them spread out in a search pattern, and they were thorough, checking every hiding spot with the patience of professionals. "They'll find us," Nathan whispered. "It's just a matter of time." Tala's eyes scanned the terrain with tactical precision. "Not if we change what they're looking for. Give me your hat and coat." Nathan handed them over, confused. Tala dressed them over a twisted juniper branch, propping it at an angle that from a distance might look like a person. She wedged the dummy into a crevice visible from the eastern ridge. "When they spot it, they'll converge," she explained. "We go west, fast and low, but you have to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Nathan looked at her, this woman who'd been a stranger 24 hours ago, now asking him to bet his life on her judgment. Yes, they waited, barely breathing, until one of Doak's men shouted and pointed at the decoy. As the riders converged on the false target, Tala led Nathan in the opposite direction, moving through terrain that seemed impassable until she showed him the path. They crawled through thorny brush that tore at their clothes, slithered down a scree slope that threatened to bury them, and finally emerged in a hidden canyon where a small stream burbled over smooth stones. Only when they were deep in the canyon's protective walls did Tala allow them to stop. Nathan collapsed against a rock, his hands shaking from adrenaline crash. "That was close," Tala finished. "Too close. They're coordinating now, military and mercenary. Briggs is all in." "We can't keep running and surveying," Nathan said. "We need to choose one or the other." Tala knelt beside the stream, splashing water on her face. In the fading light, Nathan could see the exhaustion. She'd been hiding the weight of 3 years on the run, of always looking over her shoulder, of being hunted like an animal for the crime of defending herself. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. Nathan pulled out his notebook, flipping through pages of measurements and calculations. "I'm 3/4 done. If I can get measurements from 4 more points here, 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 and the plateau summit, I'll have enough data to prove the alternate route. But those points are all in exposed terrain, wide open, dangerous." "Then we make them think we've gone to ground," Tala said. "Give them something else to chase while we finish the work." "Like what?" Tala's smile was sharp and calculating. "Like the evidence we stole from Doak's office. The ledger and map showing his trafficking routes. What if someone accidentally let slip that we're trying to reach the mission outpost to deliver it to Sheriff Cade?" Nathan saw the brilliance immediately. We spread the rumor, they chase the false trail, and we use the distraction to finish the survey. Exactly. But we need someone to plant the rumor, someone they'd believe. They both thought for a moment, then spoke simultaneously, the freckled private. It took them 2 hours of careful backtracking to find the cavalry patrol's camp. The 3 soldiers had made camp in a small box canyon, probably on the sergeant's orders, while he reported back to Briggs. Nathan and Tala watched from the ridge above, waiting. Luck favored them. The freckled private was assigned first watch while the others slept. He sat by the fire cleaning his rifle with the careful attention of someone following regulations, and Nathan saw their chance. "Let me go," Nathan whispered. "He's less likely to shoot me on sight." Tala gripped his arm. "If this goes wrong, then you run. Finish the survey, deliver the proof." "Nathan, your choice always," he said, echoing their shared understanding. "But this is mine. Let me make it." She released him, but her eyes held something that made Nathan's chest tight. Not fear for herself, fear for him. Nathan descended the ridge with deliberate noise, making sure the private heard him coming. The young soldier spun, rifle raised, but Nathan kept his hands visible and empty. "Easy, Private, I'm unarmed." The kid's rifle didn't lower. "Mr. Pike, sir, you need to surrender. The captain's orders are based on lies," Nathan interrupted. "And I think you know it. I saw your face when I mentioned the trafficking. You didn't know about it, did you?" The private's jaw worked. "Sarge says you're spreading sedition, that the woman's twisted your thinking." "Her name is Tala," Nathan said quietly, "and the only thing she's done is survive 3 years of being hunted for killing a man in self-defense. A man who was part of a trafficking operation that's stolen 23 women and girls in 3 months. That's Captain Briggs, Briggs's brother was one of the traffickers." Nathan continued, stepping closer. "Tala killed him when he tried to kidnap her cousin. Briggs has been using military resources for personal revenge ever since. And Doak's been using Briggs' authority to legitimize kidnapping." The private's rifle wavered. "You got proof of that?" "I had proof. A ledger from Doak's office showing every transaction, every victim, every payment. But I can't show you because I'm being hunted before I can deliver it to proper authorities." "Where's the ledger now?" Nathan hesitated, then committed to the lie that would save them. "Hidden at the mission outpost. We're trying to reach it, get it to Sheriff Cade before Doak's men destroy it. But between your patrol and the mercenaries, we can't get through." The private's face was a battlefield of duty and doubt. Nathan pressed his advantage. "You enlisted to protect people, didn't you? To serve justice. Well, this is what justice looks like, helping get evidence to the right hands, not chasing an innocent woman across the desert for a captain's personal vendetta." "I can't just my orders." "I'm not asking you to disobey orders," Nathan said. "I'm asking you to think about what those orders are really serving. And maybe if someone asked you where you thought we were headed, you might mention the mission outpost. Honestly believe that's our destination. Can't fault a soldier for reporting his honest belief." The private stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his rifle. "I'll think on what you said. That's all I'm promising." "That's all I'm asking." Nathan backed away, hands still visible. "The truth has a way of making itself known, Private. You just have to be willing to see it." He climbed back up the ridge where Tala waited, and together they slipped into the darkness. Behind them, the private stood staring at the fire, wrestling with the kind of choice that defined a man's character. They moved through the night with the focused efficiency of desperation. Tala's knowledge of the terrain was supernatural. She found paths Nathan would have sworn didn't exist. Water sources invisible to untrained eyes, shelter in the bones of the land itself. At each survey point, Nathan worked by moonlight and carefully shielded lantern, taking measurements with numb fingers and burning eyes. The numbers swam in his vision, but he forced his focus. Every calculation mattered. Every measurement was a brick in the wall of proof they were building. "Last point," Tala said, as dawn approached. the plateau summit, but Nathan, she didn't need to finish. Nathan could see it himself. The summit was completely exposed, visible for miles in every direction. Anyone watching would see them, and by now their false trail to the mission outpost had been discovered as the lie it was. The hunters would be furious, desperate, doubling their efforts. "I have to do it," Nathan said. "The summit measurements are critical. They show the grade advantage, the geological stability. Without them, the alternate route is just speculation." "Then we do it at first light," Tala decided. "Fast survey, maximum exposure for minimum time. I'll watch for approach." They climbed as the sky shifted from black to gray to the deep blue of pre-dawn. The summit of Four Winds Plateau was a flat expanse of ancient stone worn smooth by millennia of wind. Nathan could see why it was sacred. Standing here felt like touching the roof of the world. He set up his transit with hands that shook from exhaustion and cold, and the knowledge that they were utterly exposed. Tala stood 10 feet away, her body a statue of alertness, eyes scanning every direction. Nathan sighted through the transit, adjusted the level, recorded the first measurement, then the second, the third. His notebook was nearly full now, pages of data that would prove the alternate route was not just viable, but superior in every metric. "Nathan," Tala's voice was tight. "Riders, east and west, they've got us pinned." He didn't look up from his work. "How long?" 10 minutes, maybe less." "I need 5. You've got 3. Nathan's hands moved faster, abandoning precision for necessity. The measurements were rough now, but they'd hold. They'd have to hold. 4th point recorded, 5th. He was reaching for the 6th when Tala's hand clamped on his shoulder. "Time's up. They're in rifle range." Nathan grabbed his equipment, and they ran for the western edge of the plateau, where Tala had spotted a descent route barely more than a controlled fall down a series of rocky ledges. Bullets kicked up stone chips beside them, the crack of rifles echoing across the desert. They half climbed, half fell, down the plateau face. Nathan's transit case slammed against his ribs. His notebook nearly slipped from his pocket, but Tala's hand was there, steadying him, guiding him, keeping him alive. They hit the bottom running and found compass waiting. Good, faithful compass, and mounted as bullets whistled overhead. The mare didn't need encouragement. She ran like she understood that everything depended on speed. Behind them, the pursuit was relentless. Doak's men and cavalry soldiers united now in their determination to stop whatever threat Nathan and Tala represented. The chase stretched across the desert, a deadly game of predator and prey, where the stakes were measured in lives saved or destroyed. Tala guided them into a narrow ravine too tight for horses to follow easily. They dismounted and ran on foot, compass following with the loyalty of an old friend. The ravine twisted like a snake's path, and Nathan's lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he kept moving because stopping meant capture, and capture meant the alternate route died with them. The ravine opened onto a dry riverbed scattered with boulders the size of houses. Tala pulled Nathan behind one just as their pursuers emerged from the ravine mouth. They pressed against the stone, barely breathing as boots crunched past mere feet away. "Can't have gone far. Check every rock. Briggs wants them alive if possible, but dead works too." The voices faded. Nathan risked a glance at Tala and saw what he'd never seen before: uncertainty. Not fear, nothing so simple, but the calculation of someone running out of options. "The mission outpost is 12 miles, she whispered. "But they'll have it watched. Same with Red Butte, the telegraph office, anywhere we might try to deliver your survey data." "Then we don't go to them," Nathan said, an idea forming. "We make them come to us." "How?" Nathan pulled out his notebook, the pages filled with measurements and calculations that could change everything. "Fire. The Apache use smoke signals, right, to communicate across distances." Tala's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to signal Crow and Maria, tell them where to meet us. More than that, we create a smoke pattern that looks like we're in distress. Our friends will recognize it as a meeting signal, but Doki and Briggs will see it as an opportunity. They'll come running, bringing everyone, and walk into a trap. Tala finished. But what trap? We're two people against an army. Nathan smiled, and it felt strange on his exhausted face. We're not alone. Crow has been printing those broadsides, spreading the truth. Maria's been gathering testimony. How many people in Red Butte and beyond now know what Doak and Briggs have done? How many have daughters, sisters, wives who could have been victims? You want to turn their army against them, Tala said slowly. But people are afraid. They won't stand up just because they know the truth. They will if someone stands first. Nathan countered. If someone shows them, it's possible to fight back and win. Tala studied him for a long moment. When did the small cartographer become a tactician? When I met a warrior who taught me that courage isn't about size. It's about choice. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition deeper than words. They were no longer just allies of convenience. They were partners in the truest sense, each completing what the other lacked. Then we make smoke, Tala decided, and we choose the battlefield. They worked quickly, gathering dry brush and green wood for the signal fire. Tala's hands moved with practiced efficiency, building a fire structure that would produce maximum smoke. Nathan focused on the pattern: 3 columns, pause, 2 columns, pause, 1 column. In Crow's private code, it meant 4 winds plateau, noon tomorrow, bring proof and witnesses. But to anyone else, it would look like a distress signal from fugitives running out of options. The smoke rose into the clear morning sky, visible for miles. Nathan and Tala didn't wait to see who responded. They mounted compass and rode hard for a destination that Tala knew, a network of ancient caves near the plateau, defensible and hidden where they could rest and plan for tomorrow's confrontation. The caves were cool and dark, a blessed relief from the desert heat. Nathan collapsed against a stone wall, his body finally admitting the exhaustion he'd been denying. Tala sat across from him, methodically checking her weapons knife. The rifle they'd taken from a mercenary 2 days ago, a hatchet that looked like it had seen generations of use. "You should sleep," she said without looking up. "I'll keep watch." "We should both sleep," Nathan countered. Take turns. I don't sleep well around others. Never have." Nathan heard the history in those words. The trauma of always being hunted, always needing to stay alert, never trusting enough to be vulnerable. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "Before Briggs, before all this, what made you so cautious?" Tala's smile was bitter. "My mother was taken when I was 12, stolen by men who saw Apache women as commodities. My father searched for 3 years before he found her. She was alive, but—" Tala's hands stilled on her weapons. "She wasn't my mother anymore. Whatever those men had done, it had broken something fundamental. She walked into the desert one night and never came back." "Tala, don't," she cut him off. "Don't apologize for things you didn't do. That's noble and stupid, remember." But Nathan saw the fortress door standing wide open, now saw the wounded woman behind the warrior's mask. "Is that why you became a scout, to find others before they were broken?" "To prevent it," Tala corrected. "I track, I warn, I intercept when I can. Briggs's brother, he wasn't my first kill, just the first one with consequences that followed me." Nathan absorbed this understanding dawning. "Every woman you've saved, you're saving your mother, trying to rewrite a history you can't change." Tala's obsidian eyes met his. "You're smarter than you look, little mapmaker, and you're more vulnerable than you pretend." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared truths hanging between them. Then Tala spoke again, softer now. "When you stood in that auction square, when you said, 'Her body, her choice,' do you know what I felt? Surprise, hope." The word seemed to cost her. Hope that maybe the world was changing, that maybe there were men who saw women as people instead of property. Hope is dangerous, Nathan. It makes you want things you can't have. "What do you want?" Nathan asked, his heart hammering. Tala was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I want to stop running. I want to trust someone enough to sleep in their presence. I want... She trailed off, then started again. There's an Apache saying the strongest shelter is built by two people facing the same direction. I want to know what that feels like. Nathan stood, crossed the small space between them, and sat beside her close, but not touching, present, but not imposing. Sleep, he said quietly. I'll keep watch. And Tala, I'm facing the same direction you are. She looked at him, searching his face for lies or hidden agendas. Whatever she saw satisfied her. Slowly, carefully, she leaned against his shoulder, her body a tense line of barely relaxed muscle. If you betray this trust, she murmured, eyes already closing, I will end you. Fair, Nathan agreed. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Nathan sat motionless, afraid to disturb her, aware that this moment, this simple act of trust, meant more than any declaration could. His hand found hers, and even in sleep her fingers curled around his. He kept watch through the afternoon, his mind planning for tomorrow's confrontation. The survey data was complete. The proof was documented. Now they needed to survive long enough to present it, and to do that they needed allies to stand with them when Doak and Briggs came with their combined forces. The question was, would anyone come? Would Crow understand the smoke signal? Would Maria bring witnesses? Would the people of Red Butte find the courage to stand against tyranny and greed? Nathan looked down at Tala's sleeping face, peaceful in a way he'd never seen while she was awake. They'd built something in these desperate days, a partnership based on mutual respect, a connection forged in crisis. The beginnings of something that could be love if they survived long enough to explore it. Tomorrow would tell. Tomorrow at noon, at Four Winds Plateau. Justice or death, freedom or chains, a future together or an ending alone. Nathan tightened his grip on Tala's hand and continued his watch, counting the hours until dawn, until confrontation, until the moment when all their choices would be tested in the crucible of consequence. The sun was setting when Tala woke, disoriented for a moment before memory returned. She pulled away from Nathan's shoulder, her face carefully neutral, but he saw the flash of vulnerability before her defenses rose. How long, she asked. 4 hours. You needed it. You should have woken me, taken your turn to rest. I did rest, Nathan said truthfully, having you trust me enough to sleep that was restful in ways sleep couldn't be. Tala's expression softened fractionally, then her warrior focus returned. Bamant. We need to prepare. If anyone responds to that signal, friend or foe, they'll come at dawn. We need defensive positions, scouted escape routes, planned contingencies for every scenario. They spent the evening preparing, their coordination now seamless. Tala identified sightlines and choke points while Nathan mapped them with cartographic precision. They found a position on the plateau that gave them height advantage and multiple exit routes, a natural amphitheater of stone where voices would carry but approach would be difficult. As full dark fell, they made a small fire deep in the caves, where the smoke would dissipate without revealing their position. Nathan pulled out his survey notebook, doing final calculations by firelight, making sure every measurement would withstand scrutiny. Tell me about the route, Tala said, watching him work. What makes it better than the desecration path? Nathan's eyes lit up with the passion of someone discussing their craft. Grade percentages. The official route has 3 sections. Over 4% grade, which means heavier engines, more fuel, higher costs. The alternate route never exceeds 3%. Geological stability. The official route crosses 2 fault lines and a flood plain. The alternate route follows bedrock ridges. Distance. The official route is actually 12 miles longer. They just hid it by using misleading map projections. So it's better in every way. Better for rail operations, better for costs, better for the environment, and Nathan met her eyes, better for preserving what's sacred. The alternate route doesn't touch burial grounds, ceremonial sites, or any of the protected areas. It's what should have been chosen from the start. Except Doak's consortium wanted the land value increase more than they wanted good engineering. Greed over wisdom, Tala said. The oldest story. But not the only ending, Nathan countered Shah. Tomorrow we present proof that ethics and profit aren't enemies. That you can build wealth without destroying what matters. That choice, real choice, informed and free, is the foundation of everything worth building. Tala smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. You talk like a surveyor, but think like a philosopher. I had a good teacher. She taught me that the map is never just about the land. It's about the people who live on it, the history they carry, the future they're trying to build. This teacher sounds wise. She is. Fierce, too, and beautiful in the way ancient storms are beautiful, powerful and dangerous and absolutely vital. Tala's breath caught. Nathan, I know, he interrupted gently. I know we're in the middle of a fight for our lives. I know tomorrow could end badly. I know partnership doesn't require romance. But Tala, if we survive this, if we actually win and bring Doke and Briggs down, and prove the alternate route, I'd like to explore what else we could map together, if you want that too. She was quiet, firelight dancing across her face, shadows playing in her eyes. When I was young, she finally said. Before my mother was taken, she used to tell me stories about the first woman and first man, how they were created facing away from each other, backs together, protecting each other from different threats. Only when they'd proven they could stand together did they turn to face each other fully. Partnership before passion, trust before touch. I can wait, Nathan said, as long as you need. Good. Tala moved closer, her hand finding his. Because I'm not good at this, Nathan, at letting people in, at wanting things beyond survival. You're patient with my walls, I'll try to be brave about taking them down. They sat together as the fire burned low, hands linked facing the same direction toward an uncertain dawn. Outside, the desert night wrapped around them, vast and indifferent and achingly beautiful. Tomorrow would bring battle, confrontation, the test of everything they'd built. But tonight, they had this, a moment of peace, a shelter built by two people, choosing to stand together, the first map of a territory neither had explored but both wanted to discover. When the fire died to embers, they took turns sleeping and watching through the night. Each time Nathan woke for his watch, he found Tala's hand seeking his, even in sleep. Each time Tala woke, she leaned just slightly closer than before, the fortress walls coming down brick by careful brick. Dawn arrived too soon and too slow at once. They emerged from the caves into a morning that held its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Nathan checked his pocket watch. 4 hours until noon, 4 hours until everything. Do you think they'll come? Tala asked, scanning the horizon. Crow and Maria. If they got the signal, if they understood it, if they weren't stopped. Nathan heard the uncertainty in his own voice. A lot of ifs. And Doak's forces will definitely come. They saw the smoke. They think we're cornered. Tala's tactical mind was already working. We could run, forget the plateau meeting, take the survey data, and try to reach Santa Fe directly. We'd never make it, Nathan said. They have horses, resources, military backing. We're exhausted, nearly out of supplies, and Compass can't outrun fresh cavalry mounts. So we stand. We stand. They climbed to the plateau summit, to the amphitheater of stone they'd chosen. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of copper and gold, beautiful and merciless. Nathan set up his survey equipment one last time, not for measurements, but as a symbol. This is who we are. This is what we fight for. The first figures appeared on the horizon at 10 o'clock. Too far to identify, but moving toward the plateau with purpose. More followed from the east, from the north, converging on Four Winds Plateau, like actors taking their places for the final scene. Here we go, Tala murmured, her hand resting on her rifle. Whatever happens, Nathan, thank you for seeing me as more than what I've been forced to be. Thank you for teaching me that courage comes in all sizes, and the strongest walls are the ones we choose to lower. The figures grew closer, resolving into individuals. Nathan's heart leapt. There was Elias Crow riding with Maria Ortega and Sheriff Cade. Behind them came townspeople, dozens of them, some armed, all determined, and there his chest tightened with hope, the freckled private riding beside other soldiers whose faces Nathan didn't recognize. But from the south came Doak's forces, mercenaries, and hired guns. And from the west, Captain Briggs with a full cavalry platoon, the morning sun glinting off polished brass and loaded rifles. The forces converged on Four Winds Plateau, and Nathan Pike, small cartographer with a giant's courage, stood beside Tala Redbird, warrior and survivor, waiting to see if the map they'd drawn led to freedom or oblivion. The plateau trembled under the weight of converging destinies. Nathan's hands steadied his surveying transit, not for measurements now, but for something to anchor him as the world closed in from all sides. Tala stood beside him, rifle loose in her grip, her warrior's eyes tracking each approaching group with the precision of someone calculating odds and finding them desperately wanting. Sheriff Cade reached them first, his old gelding wheezing from the climb. Behind him, Crow and Maria dismounted quickly, and Nathan felt relief flood through him like water in a drought. "We got your signal," Crow said, slightly breathless. "Brought everyone I could muster, 37 citizens, all willing to testify about Doak's operations. The broadside worked, Nathan. People are ready to stand." Maria was already checking Tala for injuries with a medic's practiced eye. Swiftwater came with us. 2 other girls too. They're ready to speak their truth. But Nathan's momentary relief shattered as Doak's mercenaries crested the southern ridge, 15 hard men with harder weapons. And from the west, Briggs' cavalry platoon, at least 20 soldiers in formation, the captain at their head, like a blade pointed at Tala's heart. "Well," Sheriff Cade muttered, his hand moving to his shotgun, "this is about to get biblical." The freckled private Nathan had spoken to broke formation, riding forward alone with his hands raised in peace. His sergeant shouted after him, but the kid kept coming until he reached Nathan's position. "Mr. Pike," the private said, his young face grave beyond his years. "I did what you asked, told the sergeant and captain that you were heading to the mission outpost, but then I did some thinking of my own, asked questions, looked at dates and orders and things that didn't add up." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "Found this in the captain's correspondence. Payment vouchers from Doak's consortium. Briggs has been on the payroll for 18 months. Tala's eyes flashed. "You brought proof of corruption." "Yes, ma'am. And I brought 7 other soldiers who'll testify that Briggs has been using military resources for personal business. We enlisted to serve the territory, not line a captain's pockets or settle his blood feuds." The private sergeant was riding forward now, fury in every line of his body, but 2 other soldiers moved to intercept him. Nathan recognized the shift the platoon was fracturing, certainty crumbling as truth found cracks to exploit. "Enough!" Briggs's voice cut across the plateau like a cavalry saber. He rode forward past his fragmenting command, his face a mask of controlled rage. "Private Morrison, you're under arrest for treason. The rest of you stand down or face court-martial." "On what authority?" Sheriff Cade called back. "Because last I checked, I'm the law in this territory, and you're just a captain with a vendetta." Briggs's hand moved to his service revolver. "The authority of a man who's watched savages murder civilized folk for too long. That woman killed my brother." "Your brother," Tala interrupted, her voice carrying across the stone amphitheater with perfect clarity, "was trafficking Apache women. I have witnesses, I have proof, and I have the right to defend myself and others from men who see human beings as merchandise." "Lies." Briggs's horse danced sideways, feeding off its rider's agitation. "James was a decorated soldier. James was a predator," Maria said, stepping forward with her medicine bag. "I have medical records from 3 women he brutalized, documentation that predates his death by 6 months. The mission kept records, Captain. We always keep records." Doak chose that moment to make his entrance riding up from the south with his hired guns fanned out behind him. His city suit was dusty now, his too-white smile slightly manic. Fascinating theater, but ultimately pointless. I have territorial warrants forged, Crow interrupted, brandishing his broadside. I have affidavits from the actual territorial marshal declaring your warrants fraudulent. I have testimony from 17 victims of your trafficking operation. I have ledgers, had ledgers, Doak corrected smugly. Past tense. My office experienced an unfortunate fire last night. All evidence destroyed. Tragic, really. Nathan felt his stomach drop. The ledger, the proof, the paper trail, all gone. He looked at Tala and saw his own despair reflected in her eyes. Then Maria smiled, actually smiled. About that fire, she said, pulling a bundle wrapped in oilskin from her saddlebag. Funny thing, Tala stopped by your office yesterday afternoon before you even knew she'd escaped. Removed these documents, wrapped them careful, left you with copies. The plateau went silent. Doak's face cycled through confusion, comprehension, and pure fury in the space of a heartbeat. You, he breathed, staring at Tala. You planned this. The escape, the chase, the distraction, all of it. Just to steal, to reclaim evidence of your crimes, Tala corrected. Evidence that's now in the hands of proper authorities. Sheriff Cade has the originals. Crow has copies. And the territorial governor received a full set by telegraph this morning. Nathan stared at Tala in wonder. How did you? The night I escaped from the jail, she said quietly. I didn't just pick a lock, Nathan. I robbed Doak blind while his men were watching you set up that decoy in the alley. You were the distraction. The partnership worked both ways. You used me as bait. Nathan should have been angry, but he found himself grinning instead. That's brilliant. I was going to tell you, but then we were busy running for our lives and falling in. She stopped, but the unfinished word hung between them like a promise. Doak's mask of civility shattered. His hand dropped to his derringer, and suddenly 15 mercenary rifles were tracking targets. Briggs drew his revolver, and the soldiers who still followed him followed suit. The townspeople raised their own weapons, hunting rifles, shotguns, whatever they'd brought, and Four Winds Plateau became a powder keg waiting for a spark. Nobody moves, Sheriff Cade commanded, his shotgun covering Doak. This ends legal or it ends bloody, but it ends today. It ends with that savage dead. Briggs snarled, his revolver pointed at Tala's heart. She took my brother, she destroyed my career, she poisoned good soldiers against their duty. I'll see her hang or I'll see her buried. Those are the only endings I'll accept. Nathan stepped in front of Tala, his small frame blocking Briggs's line of fire. It was instinct, not strategy, the same instinct that had driven him to intervene in the auction square. You'll have to go through me first. Gladly, Briggs said, and his finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot cracked across the plateau, impossibly loud, and Nathan felt the impact, except it wasn't impact at all. It was Tala's body slamming into his, driving them both sideways as the bullet split air where they'd been standing. They hit the ground hard, Nathan's transit clattering away, his notebook spilling from his pocket. Tala rolled, came up with her rifle and fired once, not at Briggs, but at the rocks above the captain's head. Stone chips exploded and Briggs's horse reared, throwing its rider. Restraint, Tala shouted to Nathan as chaos erupted. We show restraint or we're no better than them. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Doak's mercenaries opened up on the townspeople, who returned fire from behind whatever cover they could find. Briggs' loyal soldiers engaged the defectors brother against brother in a miniature civil war. And through it all, Nathan and Tala moved like partners in a deadly dance, not shooting to kill, but shooting to survive. Maria dragged Swiftwater and the other survivor witnesses behind a boulder, her shotgun booming warnings at anyone who got too close. Crow was distributing broadside copies to anyone who'd take them, as if documentation could stop bullets. The freckled private was wrestling his own sergeant for control of a rifle, shouting something about honor and duty that was lost in the chaos. Nathan grabbed his fallen notebook, his survey data, his proof, and stuffed it back in his pocket. A bullet whined past his ear, and Tala's hand yanked him down behind a rock formation. "We have to end this," he shouted over the gunfire. "Too many people are going to die." How Tala fired twice more, disabling a mercenary's rifle without hitting the man. "They won't listen to reason. Then we give them something they can't ignore." Nathan pulled out his notebook with shaking hands. "The survey, the alternate route. If we can prove it's better prove that Doak's land investment is worthless, the whole conspiracy collapses." "Nathan, in case you haven't noticed, we're in the middle of a firefight, which is why we need to stop it." He grabbed her shoulders, making her look at him. "Trust me, like I trusted you. Please." Tala searched his face, then nodded once. "What do you need?" "Cover, and a voice loud enough to make them listen." Tala stood exposing herself to enemy fire and unleashed a whistle so piercing that even the gunfire faltered. "Cease fire," her voice carried like thunder, "or the next shot I take won't be a warning." The gunfire sputtered, stopped. Everyone turned to look at the tall Apache woman standing defiant on the plateau's highest point. "You want to kill me," Tala shouted. "Fine, but first, hear what your precious land investment is actually worth. Nathan Pike, territorial surveyor, has something to say." She pulled Nathan up beside her, and suddenly he was standing in front of an armed crowd of hostile forces, friendly witnesses and uncertain soldiers, with nothing but his notebook and his conviction that truth mattered. "The alternate rail route," Nathan began, his voice steadier than he felt, "is superior in every measurable way to the official route that crosses sacred Apache lands. Better grade percentages, better geological stability, shorter distance, lower construction costs. I have 48 hours of survey data to prove it." "Boy," Doak sneered from his position behind a boulder. "Nobody cares about your scribbles. The Territorial Council already approved the official route. Your alternate route is academic fantasy." "Is it?" Crow called out, "because I sent copies of Nathan's preliminary survey to 3 independent engineering firms. All 3 confirmed his findings. The alternate route would save the rail company $200,000 in construction costs alone." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. $200,000 was a fortune enough to build towns or buy loyalty or change the calculus of corruption. Furthermore, Crow continued, warming to his subject, the official route crosses 2 geological fault lines that Nathan's survey identified. Building on those lines risks catastrophic failure. The rail company could be liable for millions if trains derail due to foundation instability. "He's lying," Doak shouted. "My geological surveys showed solid bedrock." "Your surveys were fraudulent," Nathan interrupted. "I compared them to actual territorial geological maps. You altered data to hide the fault lines, because acknowledging them would have disqualified your route. That's fraud, Mr. Doak. Criminal fraud that endangered hundreds of future rail passengers." The mercenaries were looking at each other now, uncertain. These were hired guns, not ideologues. They fought for pay, not principle, and the calculus was shifting. If Doak's land investment was worthless, if the rail company learned they'd been defrauded, there would be no money to pay anyone. Sheriff Cade seized the moment. "Here's how this ends, gentlemen. Those of you working for Doak can ride away now, no questions asked. Or you can stay and face charges as accessories to fraud, trafficking, and attempted murder. Your choice." 5 mercenaries holstered their weapons immediately and rode off. Then 3 more. Within minutes, Doak's private army had evaporated, leaving him alone behind his boulder with his derringer and his crumbling empire. Briggs was still mounted now, his revolver still drawn, but his platoon had fragmented completely. The freckled private stood with 6 other soldiers, rifles pointed at their captain. The sergeant and 5 loyalists stood with Briggs, but their faces showed doubt. "Captain Briggs," Nathan called out. Your brother's crimes are documented. Your own corruption is proven. The vendetta is over. Put down your weapon and face justice with whatever dignity you have left. Justice. Briggs laughed, the sound bitter and broken. There's no justice for men like me, only surrender or death, and I won't give you the satisfaction of surrender. He spurred his horse directly at Tala, revolver rising. Nathan moved to intercept, but Tala was already in motion. She didn't draw a weapon. Instead, she dropped low, used Briggs's momentum against him, and swept the horse's front legs with a move that was more rodeo trick than combat technique. The horse stumbled but didn't fall. Tala was too skilled to hurt an innocent animal. Briggs tumbled from the saddle, his revolver flying from his grip. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. Tala was on him in an instant, her knife at his throat. The plateau held its breath. 3 years, Tala said quietly, her blade steady against Briggs's neck. 3 years you've hunted me, hounded me, used your brother's death as an excuse to destroy me. Here's your ending, Captain, right here, right now. Briggs's eyes showed no fear, only defiance. Do it. Prove me right about savages. Tala's hand trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of choice. Nathan saw her wrestling with 3 years of anger, grief, and survival instinct that screamed for vengeance. The fortress door was open, and behind it was a woman who'd lost too much to too many men like Briggs. Tala, Nathan said softly, not commanding, just present. You taught me about choice, about restraint, about being better than what they assume we are. He doesn't deserve mercy. No, Nathan agreed. But you deserve peace, and peace doesn't come from becoming what you hate. Tala looked at Nathan, her obsidian eyes swimming with unshed tears. Then she withdrew the knife and stood, leaving Briggs gasping on the ground. Justice, she said to the captain, not revenge. That's the difference between us. Sheriff Cade moved forward with iron shackles, securing Briggs while reading charges that included corruption, misuse of military resources, and conspiracy. The captain didn't resist, all the fight gone out of him, now that his vendetta had failed. Doak tried to run, then scrambling from his hiding spot toward the southern ridge where his horse waited, but Maria stepped into his path, shotgun raised with surprising steadiness. Swiftwater, Maria called without taking her eyes off Doak. Come here, child. The young Apache girl emerged from cover, her face showing the kind of courage that comes from choosing to face trauma rather than hide from it. She walked up to Doak, looked him in the eye, and spoke in a clear, strong voice. You took me from my family, sold me like cattle, told me I had no value except what men would pay, but you were wrong. Swiftwater's chin lifted. I have value because I'm human, because I survived, because I'm standing here now and you're the one in chains. Sheriff Cade shackled Doak while reading an even longer list of charges. The broker's face had gone gray, all his schemes and machinations reduced to the simple reality of consequences. The plateau began to clear. The defecting soldiers formed up under Private Morrison's temporary command, preparing to escort Briggs back to face military justice. The townspeople gathered their witnesses and evidence ready to present everything to the territorial council. Maria tended to minor wounds while Crow made notes for what would surely be the story of his journalistic career. And Nathan stood beside Tala, both of them breathing hard, alive, victorious in ways that went beyond simple survival. You could have killed him, Nathan said quietly. Briggs, you had every right, every reason. Rights and reasons aren't the same as needs, Tala replied. I needed to prove to myself more than anyone that I could choose mercy, that 3 years of being hunted hadn't turned me into a hunter. She looked at him. You gave me that choice by standing beside me, not in front of me, not behind me, beside me. Nathan took her hand, lacing their fingers together in full view of everyone still on the plateau. Partnership, like the first woman and first man standing back to back, except I think we're ready to turn and face each other now. Tala's smile was soft, vulnerable, more beautiful than anything Nathan had ever surveyed or mapped. Not quite yet, little mapmaker. We still have a territorial council to convince, a rail route to validate, and a future to build. But soon, I promise you soon. Sheriff Cade approached with a grin. Well, that was the damnedest thing I've seen in 40 years of law work. You two just dismantled a criminal empire with survey equipment and courage. The governor's going to want to meet you. The governor can wait, Nathan said, pulling out his notebook. First, I need to finalize these survey calculations, present them properly to the territorial council, make sure the alternate route gets approved, and the sacred lands stay protected. And I, Tala added, need to guide him through the final verification points, make sure his measurements account for things only Apache knowledge can reveal. Land isn't just geology and grade percentages, it's history, spirit, connection. Partnership, Crow observed, having materialized with his ever-present notepad. Engineering and indigenous wisdom working together, that's a story that deserves telling. Then tell it right, Tala said. Tell it so people understand that respecting sacred ground isn't just ethical, it's practical. That listening to those who've lived on land for generations makes better maps than any survey equipment alone. Maria joined them, Swiftwater at her side. The council convenes tomorrow at Red Butte. We'll have all witnesses ready, all evidence prepared. But Nathan, can you really validate the entire alternate route in time? That's precise work. It is, Nathan agreed. Which is why Tala and I are going back out tonight, finishing the verification surveys, documenting everything that makes the alternate route superior. We'll work through the night, if we have to. You'll work smarter than that, Tala corrected. We rest first, work sharp. Exhausted surveyors make mistakes, and we can't afford mistakes now. They returned to the cave system that had sheltered them the night before, but everything felt different now. The desperate flight had become a victory march. The uncertain alliance had solidified into partnership, and the fortress walls Tala had maintained for 3 years were coming down brick by careful brick. They built a small fire as evening fell, sharing dried meat and water, while Nathan reviewed his calculations and Tala cleaned her weapons. It was companionable, comfortable, the kind of silence that spoke of trust rather than tension. When this is over, Tala said suddenly, when the route is approved, and Doak's in prison, and Briggs is court-martialed, and the sacred lands are protected, what then? Nathan looked up from his notebook. What do you want it to be? I want... Tala struggled with words, this woman who was so precise with knives and rifles, but uncertain with emotions. I want to stop running. I want to build something instead of just surviving. I want to know what it feels like to trust someone completely, to let them close without wondering when betrayal will come. That's not a small want, Nathan observed. No, but you asked. Nathan set aside his notebook and moved to sit beside her. I want those things too, and I want to map new territories with you, not just land routes, but life paths. Figure out what a future looks like when two people who were supposed to be impossible find each other anyway. Supposed to be impossible, Tala repeated. The small mapmaker and the tall warrior, the white man and the Apache woman, the surveyor and the scout. We're every reason why things shouldn't work. Or every reason why they should, Nathan countered Sean. Different skills that complement each other, different perspectives that create a fuller picture, different histories that can build a shared future if we're brave enough to try. Tala was quiet for a long moment, firelight dancing across her face. Then she reached out her calloused hand, gentle on his cheek. You make it sound possible. It is possible. We've proven that already. We surveyed impossible terrain, defeated. Impossible odds, built an impossible partnership that saved lives and sacred ground. What's a relationship compared to that? Harder, Tala said, honestly. Fighting enemies is easier than fighting your own fears. But I want to try Nathan. When this is done, when we've won completely, and can breathe without looking over our shoulders, I want to try." Nathan covered her hand with his, pressing it to his cheek. "Then we'll try. Together, figuring it out as we go, making mistakes and fixing them, mapping territory neither of us has explored, but both of us want to discover." They stayed like that, hands linked, faces close, sharing warmth and hope and the fragile, powerful promise of a future that was finally within reach. The desert night wrapped around them, vast and star-scattered and infinite with possibility. Tomorrow would bring the Territorial Council the final presentation, the last battle for legitimacy and justice. But tonight, they had a moment of peace, a shelter built by two people facing the same direction, the first real rest either had known in too long. When sleep finally claimed them, they slept back to back, the Apache way, the warrior's way, protecting each other from different threats. But their hands stayed linked through the night, a promise that soon, very soon, they'd be ready to turn and face each other fully. Dawn came soft and golden, the desert morning cool and clear. Nathan and Tala rose early, ate quickly, and set out to complete the final survey verifications, with the focused intensity of people who knew this was the last obstacle between them and freedom. They worked through the morning with seamless coordination. Nathan took measurements while Tala identified landmarks invisible to untrained eyes. Ancient water markers, geological features that spoke of stability, spirit paths that marked the boundaries of sacred ground. Together they documented a route that honored both science and tradition, engineering and wisdom, progress and preservation. By noon, Nathan's notebook was complete, every measurement verified, every calculation confirmed, every advantage of the alternate route documented with the kind of precision that would withstand the most rigorous scrutiny. "It's done," he said, closing the notebook with a sense of finality. "This is everything the Territorial Council needs to approve the alternate route, everything to protect the sacred lands and prove that ethics and profit can align." Tala nodded, then gestured to the eastern horizon. "Then we'd better ride. Red Butte's 5 hours from here, and the council convenes at sundown. We can't be late for our own revolution." They mounted Compass' faithful, patient Compass, who'd carried them through everything, and rode toward Red Butte at a steady lope. The desert unfolded before them, no longer a place of flight and fear, but a landscape of possibility and promise. As they rode, Nathan found himself thinking about maps and territories, about the way lines on paper could change lives and futures. He'd started this journey as a small man who mapped land. He was ending it as a partner who'd helped map justice, respect, and the radical idea that choice was the foundation of everything worth building. Beside him, Tala rode with the grace of someone who'd finally stopped running. Her face was tilted toward the horizon, toward Red Butte, toward a future that was no longer about survival but about living. And in her eyes, Nathan saw the fortress completely dismantled, the warrior at rest, the woman emerging whole and hopeful and ready. Red Butte appeared in the distance, the town that had started this whole desperate journey, but they weren't returning as fugitives or rebels. They were returning as partners who'd proven that standing together could change the world, one survey measurement and one choice at a time. The Territorial Council awaited, justice awaited, a future together awaited, and Nathan Pike and Tala Redbird rode toward it all with their hands linked and their hearts, finally, impossibly, miraculously free. Red Butte's main street was packed tighter than Nathan had ever seen it. Wagons lined both sides, horses tethered to every available post, and people, so many people, crowded the boardwalks and spilled into the dust. Word had spread like wildfire through the telegraph lines that Crow had so effectively exploited. This wasn't just a Territorial Council meeting anymore. It was a reckoning. Nathan and Tala dismounted a block from the courthouse, and immediately a hush fell over the nearest onlookers. Nathan felt the weight of their stares, some curious, some hostile, some filled with the kind of hope that made his chest tight. "They're looking at you like you're some kind of legend," Nathan murmured to Tala as they led Compass toward the livery. "They're looking at us," Tala corrected. the mapmaker who stood up to a mob, and the savage who chose mercy over revenge. We're either heroes or fools, depending on who's telling the story. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, middle-aged, worn hands clutching a shawl, her face lined with years of desert sun and harder years of loss. "Miss Redbird," her voice trembled. "My daughter, Elena. She disappeared 4 months ago. They said she ran off, but I knew—" Her voice broke. "Mr. Doak's ledger, the one in the Gazette, it had her name. You saved the others. You gave me proof that I wasn't crazy, that my girl was taken." Tala's expression softened in a way Nathan had rarely seen. Elena Martinez, 16 years old, sold to a mining camp in Silver Creek. The ledger shows she was transferred 3 times. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I'm sorry." The trail went cold after the 3rd transfer. The woman's face crumpled, but she reached out and gripped Tala's hand. "Thank you for trying, for caring enough to steal that ledger and prove the truth. At least now I know. At least now I can stop wondering." More people pressed forward, then parents of missing children, siblings of disappeared women, husbands whose wives had vanished into Doak's network. Each one thanked them, touched them, wept on them. Nathan felt the weight of it all, the lives destroyed and the justice that had come too late for so many. By the time they reached the courthouse steps, they had an escort of survivors and witnesses, a living testament to why the alternate route mattered, why protecting sacred ground mattered, why standing up to corruption mattered. Sheriff Cade met them at the door, his weathered face grim. "Counsel's inside. Governor sent a representative, some bureaucrat named Hendricks, who doesn't look happy to be here." Doak's lawyer showed up, 2 slick bastard from Santa Fe, already filing motions and citing precedents. Doak has a lawyer. Nathan's stomach sank. "But he's in custody for trafficking. Hasn't been convicted yet," Cade said, "and his consortium has deep pockets. They're fighting this hard, Nathan. Not just fighting the criminal charges, but fighting the alternate route too. If they can delay the council decision, keep the official route in play, they might salvage their land investment, even if Doak hangs." Tala's jaw tightened. "So we need to be perfect. Not just good, not just convincing. Perfect." "No pressure," Nathan muttered, clutching his survey notebook like a lifeline. The courthouse interior was packed beyond capacity. The territorial council sat at a raised bench, 5 men in suits that marked them as politicians comfortable with compromise. Governor Hendricks stood to the side, a thin man with wire spectacles, and the perpetually pinched expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. And there, at a table with stacks of legal documents, sat Doak's lawyer, a silver-haired man who radiated expensive competence. Nathan and Tala took their positions at the petitioner's table, flanked by Crow and Maria. Sheriff Cade stood nearby, hand resting on his shotgun, more out of habit than threat. The gallery behind them was filled with townspeople, witnesses, survivors, and journalists who'd traveled from as far as Santa Fe to cover what the papers were calling the Red Butte Revolution. Council Chairman Porter, a portly man whose jowls shook when he spoke, rapped his gavel. "This emergency session of the Territorial Council is called to order. We're here to address allegations of corruption in the Southern Rail route approval and to hear arguments for an alternate route. Mr. Pike, you filed the petition. Present your case." Nathan stood his legs steadier than he expected. He'd surveyed dangerous terrain, faced armed mercenaries, and stood between Tala and a captain's bullet. Speaking truth to politicians should have been easy by comparison, but his mouth was dry as desert sand. "Councilman," he began, opening his notebook, "I've completed a comprehensive survey of an alternate route for the Southern Rail line. This route avoids sacred Apache lands, improves grade percentages, reduces geological risk, and saves the rail company $200,000 in construction costs." Doak's lawyer stood smoothly. "Objection, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pike is an apprentice surveyor, not certified. His measurements have no legal standing." I trained under Samuel Morrison, Nathan countered, whose surveys are the foundation of half this territory's land records. My methodology follows territorial standards, and my measurements have been independently verified by whom? The lawyer interrupted. Other apprentices, biased parties with an agenda to discredit my client. Crow stood. By Morrison himself. I have a sworn affidavit from the territory's chief surveyor confirming Nathan Pike's work meets or exceeds certification standards. Furthermore, 3 independent engineering firms reviewed the survey data and reached the same conclusions. The lawyer didn't miss a beat. Affidavits can be purchased, Mr. Crow, as your own publication has so eagerly demonstrated in recent days. The question isn't whether Mr. Pike can draw maps, it's whether his maps should override a route already approved by this very council. Chairman Porter leaned forward. That's the crux of it, isn't it? We approved the official route 6 months ago, based on surveys from Doak's consortium. Now you're asking us to reverse that decision. The financial implications alone, the financial implications of staying with the official route are catastrophic. Nathan interrupted his frustration, overriding his caution. 2 geological fault lines, gentlemen, right here and here. He unrolled his master map on the table. The official route crosses both. 1 moderate earthquake, 1 seasonal shift, and trains derail. Passengers die. The rail company faces lawsuits that make $200,000 in savings look like pocket change. Alleged fault lines, the lawyer said. Based on one man's interpretation, based on territorial geological surveys from 1881 and 1883, Maria interrupted, producing documents from her seemingly bottomless medicine bag. Public records that Doak's consortium conveniently ignored when preparing their route proposal. The council members were murmuring now, passing Nathan's maps between them, comparing them to the official route drawings. Nathan saw doubt creeping into their expressions, the first cracks in certainty. Then Governor Hendricks spoke, his voice carrying the weight of Santa Fe authority. Gentlemen, I'm less concerned with competing surveys than I am with the criminal allegations. Mr. Doak stands accused of trafficking, forgery, and corruption. If these charges are proven, everything associated with his consortium becomes suspect, including the route survey this council approved. The criminal case is separate from the route decision, the lawyer argued, and my client's alleged personal failings don't invalidate sound engineering. Sound engineering, Tala's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. She stood, and every eye turned to her. Your client's engineering is as fraudulent as his warrants. I've walked every mile of both routes. The official route doesn't just cross fault lines. It destroys burial grounds, contaminates water sources that Apache communities depend on, and requires blasting through rock formations that hold centuries of spiritual significance. The lawyer's smile was condescending. Miss Redbird, I'm sure your people's superstitions are very important to you, but territorial development can't be held hostage to superstitions. Tala's voice went dangerously quiet. Those superstitions are why your official route requires 3 extra miles of track. The sacred springs you'd contaminate, they're the only reliable water source for 50 miles. Destroy them and you destroy the settlements that depend on them. Destroy the settlements and you lose the labor force that builds and maintains the rail. But you didn't care about sustainability, did you? Just immediate profit? I care about legal precedent, the lawyer shot back. And precedent says indigenous land claims don't supersede territorial development rights. Unless, Crow interjected, the development is fraudulent from inception, which brings us to the ledgers. He produced the oilskin bundle. Documented proof that Doak's consortium purchased the official route land using profits from human trafficking. Blood money, gentlemen. You approved a route built on blood money. The courtroom erupted. Spectators shouted, the council members argued among themselves, and the lawyer was on his feet protesting procedural violations. Chairman Porter's gavel cracked repeatedly, trying to restore order. In the chaos, Nathan noticed something. A man in the back of the gallery, nondescript, forgettable, the kind of person who blended into crowds, was taking notes with unusual intensity. Not a journalist's scattered observations, but precise documentation, recording every word, every argument, every piece of evidence presented. Nathan leaned toward Tala. Back row, right side, brown coat. He's not a journalist. Tala's eyes found the man instantly, her warrior's instincts assessing threat. Federal marshal or territorial investigator, someone official. Before Nathan could respond, the courthouse doors burst open and Private Morrison rushed in, still in his cavalry uniform, his young face flushed with urgency. "Mr. Chairman," Morrison's voice carried over the chaos. "Sir, I have urgent testimony regarding Captain Briggs and the consortium's activities." The lawyer moved to block him. "This soldier has no standing in civil proceedings." "I have evidence of military corruption," Morrison countered, pulling documents from his jacket. "Captain Briggs' personal correspondence with Doak payment vouchers, orders to use federal resources for private business. Sir, the captain wasn't just helping Doak, he was a full partner in the trafficking operation." The courtroom went silent. Even Chairman Porter seemed stunned. "These are military documents," Morrison continued, his hands shaking slightly, but his voice steady. "Classified communications that I'm revealing under whistleblower protections. Captain Briggs used his authority to identify vulnerable Apache women, provided military transport for Doak's wagons, and received 20% of trafficking profits in exchange." Governor Hendricks moved forward, taking the documents with careful hands. His face grew progressively paler as he read. "Good God, this is Councilman, if this is authentic, we're looking at federal crimes. Military corruption at the command level." "It's authentic," Morrison said. "I have 7 other soldiers who'll testify to the same. We followed orders we thought were legal, protecting citizens from hostile threats. We didn't know—" His voice cracked. "We didn't know we were helping him hunt innocent people." The man in the brown coat stood, then his movement drawing every eye. He walked forward with the confidence of someone who didn't need to announce his authority. It simply radiated from him. "Territorial Marshal Webb," he said, producing a badge. "I've been investigating the Doak Consortium for 6 months at the governor's request. What I've heard today confirms everything my investigation has uncovered." He turned to the council. "Gentlemen, I'm placing Doak's assets under territorial seizure, including all land purchases made in the past year. The official rail route as approved is built on a foundation of fraud and must be voided immediately." The lawyer was sputtering protests, citing procedures and appeals, but Marshal Webb ignored him. "Furthermore, I'm recommending federal charges against Captain Briggs for conspiracy, corruption, and trafficking. The military will handle their own, but the territorial charges stand." Chairman Porter looked like a man watching his certainty crumble. "Marshal Webb, if we void the official route, we're back to square one. The rail company has contracts, deadlines, investors expecting. You're back to Mr. Pike's alternate route," Webb corrected, "which, according to every piece of evidence presented today, is superior in every measurable way. Better engineering, better ethics, better economics. Gentlemen, you have an opportunity to turn corruption into justice. I suggest you take it." The council members huddled together, urgent whispers that Nathan couldn't quite hear. His heart hammered against his ribs. They were so close, so impossibly close to winning completely. Then the doors opened again, and this time it was a telegraph operator breathing hard from running. "Mr. Chairman, urgent wire from the rail company headquarters." Porter took the telegram, read it, and his expression shifted through confusion to something like relief. "Gentlemen, this is from Pacific Southern Rail. They've reviewed the survey comparisons that Mr. Crow distributed. They're requesting permission to use the alternate route, citing cost savings and reduced liability." Nathan felt Tala's hand find his under the table, squeezing tight. "The rail company," Porter continued, reading from the telegram, "states that if the alternate route can be validated and approved within 30 days, They'll increase their territorial investment by 15% and hire local labor, including Apache scouts and guides, for the construction phase. They'll hire Apache workers. Tala's voice was barely a whisper. Fair wages, full contracts. Porter read. They're calling it the Pike Protocol, integrating indigenous knowledge with modern engineering for optimal results. It seems your partnership has impressed more than just this council, Mr. Pike, Miss Redbird. The gallery erupted in cheers. Spectators were standing applauding, crying. Nathan saw Swiftwater hugging Maria, saw the woman who'd lost her daughter, Elena, weeping with something that might have been hope, saw Crow scribbling furiously in his notebook to capture every moment. But the lawyer wasn't done. Mr. Chairman, even if the council votes to approve the alternate route implementation, requires federal approval. The Bureau of Land Management, the Department of Interior congressional committees, the process could take months, even years, by which time the rail company's offer expires and we're back to, I can expedite federal approval, Marshall Webb said. My investigation gives me the authority to recommend emergency measures when fraud has compromised territorial development. I'll have approval within 2 weeks. Chairman Porter looked at his fellow council members. Whatever he saw in their faces seemed to decide him. All in favor of voiding the official route and approving Mr. Pike's alternate route for the Southern Rail Line. 4 hands rose immediately. The 5th councilman, a thin man who'd been quiet throughout, hesitated, then slowly raised his hand as well. Unanimous. Porter declared, his gavel falling with the finality of justice. The alternate route is approved. Mr. Pike, you'll work with territorial engineers to finalize the specifications. Miss Redbird, you'll serve as chief indigenous consultant at the rate of, he consulted the telegram again, $100 per month plus expenses. Tala blinked. 100, that's more than most cavalry scouts make. You're worth more than most cavalry scouts, Porter said simply. The rail company recognizes that. So does this council. The courtroom was pure celebration now. Nathan found himself surrounded by well-wishers, his hand shaken so many times it went numb. But through the crowd his eyes found Tala's, and in that moment they shared something beyond victory. They shared the bone-deep satisfaction of having stood together and changed the world. Sheriff Cade was leading Doak's lawyer away, the man still protesting but clearly defeated. Marshall Webb was organizing the seizure of consortium assets with bureaucratic efficiency, and Crow was already distributing special editions of the Gazette with the headline, Justice Prevails, Alternate Route, Approved Corruption Exposed. Maria pushed through the crowd to reach them, her face glowing. Swiftwater wants to train as a surveyor's apprentice. She says if you two can map justice, she wants to learn to map freedom for others. Nathan felt his eyes sting. Tell her yes. Tell her we'll teach her everything. As the celebration continued, Governor Hendricks approached with the man in the brown coat, Marshall Webb, and another figure Nathan didn't recognize, a woman in tailored traveling clothes that spoke of eastern cities and serious money. Pike, Miss Redbird, Hendricks said formally. May I present Mrs. Catherine Ashworth, Chief Investor in Pacific Southern Rail. She came personally to witness the council decision. Mrs. Ashworth extended her hand to Tala. First Nathan noticed, which spoke volumes about her character. Miss Redbird, your testimony about sustainable development was fascinating. The rail company has been losing money on routes that ignore indigenous knowledge. Your approach, respecting the land while developing it, that's the future. It should have been the present all along, Tala said, shaking the offered hand. But thank you for recognizing it now. Mrs. Ashworth turned to Nathan. Mr. Pike, I'd like to offer you a position as senior surveyor for all our western routes. Chief Morrison speaks highly of your work, and today's presentation demonstrated strategic thinking we desperately need. The salary would be no, Nathan said, surprising himself as much as Mrs. Ashworth. I beg your pardon. I appreciate the offer truly, but I'm not interested in working exclusively for the rail company. He glanced at Tala. We have other plans. A partnership that maps more than just rail routes. Mrs. Ashworth's eyes sparkled with understanding. I see. Well, perhaps a consulting arrangement then. We pay for your expertise on routes that require indigenous knowledge integration, but you maintain independence for other projects. Nathan looked at Tala, who nodded slightly. That might work, if the terms respect both our contributions equally. Equally, Mrs. Ashworth agreed. I'll have contracts drawn up. This partnership of yours, the cartographer and the scout, it's going to change how we think about Western development. You realize that, don't you? Nathan hadn't, actually. He'd been so focused on surviving, on proving the alternate route, on bringing Doak and Briggs to justice, that he hadn't thought about implications beyond Red Butte. But looking at the faces around him, the hopeful survivors, the reformed soldiers, the townspeople who'd found courage to stand against corruption, he began to see it. They hadn't just saved sacred ground or exposed criminals. They'd demonstrated a new model partnership over possession wisdom, over force sustainability, over exploitation, and people were hungry for that model, desperate for proof that a better way was possible. The celebration moved from the courthouse to the street, spontaneous and joyful. Someone had brought out fiddles and a guitar, and impromptu dancing broke out in the dust. Nathan and Tala found themselves swept into the revelry, spinning and laughing with an abandon that felt almost foreign after so many days of tension. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of copper and gold, Nathan and Tala finally extracted themselves from the crowd. They walked to the edge of town, to a small rise where they could see both Red Butte's celebration and the vast desert beyond. We did it, Nathan said, still slightly disbelieving. We actually did it. You sound surprised. Tala's smile was soft in the fading light. Shouldn't I be? A week ago I was nobody, an apprentice surveyor who kept his head down and mapped property lines. Now I'm... He trailed off, not sure how to finish. Now you're the man who stood in an auction square and declared that choice matters more than ownership. Tala finished. Now you're the surveyor who proved that ethics and profit can align. Now you're my partner in every sense of the word. She paused. If you want to be. Nathan turned to face her fully, this woman who'd been a stranger and became an ally and had transformed into something he didn't have words for yet. The first woman and first man, he said quietly, referencing the story she'd told him. They stood back to back until they'd proven they could protect each other, until trust was earned. Yes, Tala said, her obsidian eyes reflecting the sunset. I think we've proven that, don't you? Tala's answer was to turn to face him instead of the horizon, to close the distance between them until they stood close enough to share breath. I think we've earned the right to see what comes next. Her hand rose to his cheek, calloused and gentle, and Nathan covered it with his own. What does come next? Partnership, Tala said. In surveying, in consulting, in building a future where respect is the foundation. And maybe, if we're brave enough, partnership in other ways too. Other ways. Nathan's heart was hammering. The Apache have a courtship tradition, Tala explained. The man offers the woman 3 gifts over 3 seasons, not possessions, but demonstrations. Demonstrations of character, capability, commitment. You've given me all 3 in 3 days, Nathan Pike. You've shown me who you are when the stakes are highest. And Nathan barely breathed the word. And I want to give you the same. Show you who I am when I'm not running, when I'm building instead of surviving. See if what we've forged in crisis can grow in peace. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. Is that something you want? Nathan's answer was to close the final distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted of desert dust and hope and the future they were mapping together. Tala responded with a gentleness that surprised him, her warrior's strength tempered with tenderness, her kiss a promise rather than a demand. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the desert night had fallen fully. Stars scattered across the sky like survey markers, plotting courses to infinity. 3 seasons, Nathan said, to prove we can build what we've started, to show each other who we are in peace as well as war. 3 seasons, Tala agreed, and then we decide what comes next. Together, your choice, my choice, our choice, always. They stood there as Red Butte celebrated below, as the desert breathed around them, as the future they'd fought for spread out in every direction. The small mapmaker and the tall warrior facing each other, at last ready to explore territory neither had charted, but both were eager to discover. Behind them the celebration continued. Ahead of them 3 seasons of proving stretched into possibility, and between them a partnership that had started with desperate necessity had transformed into something neither had expected, but both were brave enough to embrace. The revolution was won, justice was served, sacred ground was protected, and Nathan Pike and Tala Redbird had mapped more than just an alternate route. They'd mapped a future where choice, respect, and partnership were the foundations of everything worth building. The 3 seasons passed like chapters in a story, being written in real time each day, adding another line to the map Nathan and Tala were drawing together. The first season brought work that consumed them both. Nathan spent weeks with territorial engineers translating his survey data into construction specifications that would guide the rail crews. Tala rode the alternate route, repeatedly marking water sources and sacred sites, teaching crews how to read the land's language so they could build without destroying. They worked from dawn until darkness, often apart, sometimes together, always aware of each other, like twin stars in the same constellation. It was during this season that the first test came. A rail company foreman named Dutch Keller arrived from back east with ideas about efficiency that involved cutting corners through Apache burial grounds. Nathan was in Santa Fe reviewing contracts when it happened, and Tala faced Keller alone. "Miss Redbird," Keller had said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I respect your cultural concerns, but time is money, and this detour you're insisting on adds 3 days to our schedule." Tala had stood her ground on the disputed site, a small rise where 7 generations of her people rested. "Then you'll be 3 days behind schedule, because you're not crossing here." Keller had brought 10 workers with him, all carrying tools that could double as weapons. "I don't take orders from squaws. Now move or we'll move you." What happened next became legend in the rail camps. Tala didn't fight, didn't threaten. She simply sat down on the burial ground and began to sing a low, mournful Apache death song that made even the hardest men shift uncomfortably. Then she started naming names. Every person buried beneath that ground, their lineage, their deeds, their connections to the living. She sang for 3 hours, turning the dead from abstractions into people until Keller's own men refused to dig. When Nathan arrived by hard-riding courier, he found Tala still singing and the work crew sitting in respectful silence around her, some with tears on their weathered faces. Keller was nowhere to be seen. He'd left in disgust, but his men had stayed. "She made us see them," one worker told Nathan. "The people in the ground made us understand we'd be digging through somebody's grandmother, somebody's child. Can't do that. Won't do that no matter what the foreman says." Nathan had sat beside Tala, then adding his voice to hers, though he didn't know the words. And when Mrs. Ashworth arrived 2 days later to investigate the delay, she found a new route marked around the burial ground, slightly longer, slightly more expensive, but infinitely more right. "The Pike Protocol," she'd said with satisfaction, approving the change. "Respect first, profit second, but both achievable. Mr. Keller is being reassigned to a desk in Philadelphia, where his efficiency can't harm anyone." That night, Nathan and Tala had sat by a campfire on the construction site, and he'd asked her, "How did you know they'd listen? How did you know singing would work when force might not have?" "I didn't know," Tala admitted. "But you taught me something in Red Butte. You stood without a weapon and changed minds with words and conviction. I thought maybe I could do the same, use my voice as a tool instead of my knife. You're building as well as protecting now, Nathan observed. We both are, Tala corrected, and her hand had found his across the fire, their partnership deepening with each shared challenge. The second season brought a different kind of test. Briggs came to trial in Santa Fe, and both Nathan and Tala were subpoenaed to testify. Sitting in that courtroom watching the captain in shackles stare at them with undiluted hatred was harder than Nathan had anticipated. Briggs's defense attorney was vicious, trying to paint Tala as a murderer who'd killed an innocent soldier and Nathan as her dupe. "Mr. Pike," the attorney had asked, voice smooth as snake oil, "isn't it true that you've become romantically involved with Miss Redbird, that your testimony is compromised by personal feelings rather than objective truth?" Nathan had looked at Tala sitting straight-backed in the witness gallery, then back at the attorney. "Yes, I have feelings for Miss Redbird, but those feelings are built on respect for who she is, a woman of honor who survived 3 years of unjust persecution. My testimony isn't compromised by love. It's strengthened by finally understanding what justice actually looks like." The courtroom had erupted, but Nathan saw Tala's eyes widen, saw her hand press against her heart. He'd just declared his love in open court, made it part of the public record, bound it into the testimony that would determine Briggs's fate. When Tala took the stand, the attorney tried to break her composure, dredging up every detail of the brother's death. "You killed James Briggs in cold blood, didn't you, Miss Redbird?" "I killed him in self-defense," Tala had responded, her voice steady as bedrock. "After he tried to kidnap my cousin for trafficking purposes, after I tried to talk him down, tried to walk away, tried every option that didn't involve violence. He drew first. He fired first. I was faster. That's not murder. That's survival." "Convenient that your cousin can't testify to corroborate your story," the attorney sneered. Tala's composure finally cracked, but not with anger, with grief. "My cousin Running Deer took her own life 6 months after the attack, unable to live with what James Briggs and his men had done to her. So no, she can't testify. But her scars could. Her medical records can. The 3 other women who escaped that same trafficking ring can. Would you like their names?" The attorney had retreated, and the jury had convicted Briggs on every charge. 15 years in territorial prison, dishonorable discharge pension revoked. As the verdict was read, Briggs had locked eyes with Tala one last time. "You've ruined me," he said quietly. "No," Tala replied. "You ruined yourself. I just survived you." After the trial, Nathan and Tala had walked the streets of Santa Fe in silence, processing the weight of closure. Finally, Tala spoke. "You said you loved me, in court, in front of everyone." "I did," Nathan confirmed. "Was that wrong? Too soon, It was terrifying," Tala interrupted. "And perfect. And I don't know how to say it back yet, but Nathan, I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to believe I deserve something beyond survival." "You deserve everything," Nathan said, "but I can wait. 3 seasons, remember. We're only on the 2nd. Tala had stopped, then pulling him into an alley away from curious eyes. She'd kissed him with a desperation that spoke of barriers finally crumbling, of a woman letting herself want something beyond mere existence. When they parted, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, "I'm afraid of this, afraid of wanting you so much that losing you would break me." "Then we build something that doesn't break," Nathan whispered back, "something with foundations deep enough to weather any storm." The 3rd season arrived with autumn colors painting the desert in copper and gold. The rail line was nearly complete, and Nathan and Tala were invited to ride the first locomotive through the alternate route. They stood on the engine's platform with Mrs. Ashworth watching their mapped future become rolling reality. "You two have changed everything," Mrs. Ashworth said as the train rounded a curve that skirted sacred grounds. "Other rail companies are adopting the Pike protocol. Territorial councils are requiring indigenous consultation. Congress is debating federal protections for sacred sites. You've started something bigger than one rail line. Nathan felt the weight of it, not just what they'd accomplished, but what it meant. They'd proven that respect and progress weren't enemies, that listening to voices historically silenced made better outcomes for everyone, that partnership based on equality could achieve what domination never could. But there was still something unfinished between them, a question 3 seasons had been building toward. As the train completed its journey, pulling into the new Red Butte station, to cheering crowds, Nathan turned to Tala. The 3 seasons are complete. We've shown each other who we are in work, in crisis, in victory and grief. So now we decide what comes next. Tala's answer was interrupted by commotion at the station. A group of Apache elders had arrived, led by a woman whose bearing marked her as someone of great importance. She approached Tala with eyes that held both sternness and something that might have been pride. Grandmother, Tala breathed, and Nathan realized this was family, the first of Tala's family he'd met. The grandmother studied Nathan with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Then she spoke in Apache, and Tala translated. She says the spirits have been watching. They've seen your partnership, your respect for sacred ground, your choice to stand beside me rather than above or below me. She says, Tala's voice caught. She says Running Deer's spirit is at peace now because justice was served and because I've finally allowed myself to live instead of just survive. The grandmother spoke again, this time gesturing to both of them. Tala's eyes widened. She's giving permission, Tala whispered, for us, for everything. In Apache tradition, an elder's blessing it's everything, Nathan. It means our union would be recognized, honored. Nathan's heart hammered. Is that what you want, union marriage? Before Tala could answer, Maria pushed through the crowd, her face urgent. Nathan, telegram from the territorial governor. There's a crisis, a land dispute near Canyon de Chelly. Armed standoff between settlers and Apache families. They're asking for you and Tala specifically, asking for the Pike Protocol to resolve it before blood is shed. Nathan and Tala exchanged glances, their moment of personal reckoning interrupted by the world's needs. But Tala smiled, a real smile full of warmth and certainty. We answer, she said simply, because this is who we are. We build peace together. She turned to Nathan. And when we've resolved this crisis, when we've prevented another tragedy, we'll finish this conversation. We'll decide our future. But Nathan, she took his hand in front of her grandmother, in front of the crowd, in front of everyone. I already know my answer. I've known since you stood in that auction square and gave me choice. I choose you. I choose us. I choose the future we're mapping together. Nathan pulled her close, kissing her in front of Apache elders and rail investors and townspeople and journalists, making their partnership undeniably, publicly, joyfully clear. When they parted, the crowd erupted in cheers, but Nathan only had eyes for Tala. Then let's go prevent a war, he said, and then let's plan a wedding. They rode for Canyon de Chelly that afternoon, arriving 2 days later to find exactly what Maria had described: 50 armed settlers facing 30 Apache families with territorial militia trying desperately to keep the peace. The dispute was over water rights complicated by old treaties and newer claims, with both sides convinced the other was stealing what was rightfully theirs. Nathan and Tala surveyed the disputed territory together, their partnership now so synchronized they barely needed words. Nathan's measurements revealed that the water source was large enough for both communities if managed correctly. Tala's knowledge showed seasonal patterns the settlers didn't understand, times when Apache use was critical for survival, other times when settler irrigation wouldn't impact Apache access. They presented their findings to both sides, not in a courthouse, but on the disputed ground itself. Partnership, Nathan told the assembled groups. Shared management. Apache families control distribution during dry seasons, when their survival knowledge is critical. Settler families manage irrigation during wet seasons when their farming expertise maximizes everyone's benefit. Both communities contribute labor to maintain the source. Both communities share the abundance. Why should we trust them? A settler demanded, gesturing at the Apache families. Because they've lived on this land for generations and haven't destroyed it yet, Tala replied. Because their knowledge kept these water sources flowing when drought killed rivers elsewhere. Because partnership makes everyone stronger than domination makes anyone. An Apache elder spoke his words, translated by Tala. Why should we trust you? You've broken every treaty, taken every promise, and ground it to dust. Nathan stepped forward. Because we're offering something different. Not a treaty you're forced to accept. Not promises made by people with power over you. We're offering documented, legally binding partnership with territorial enforcement. Break the agreement either side and the territory intervenes, not to take sides, but to restore balance. Over 3 days, they negotiated every detail. Water flow measurements, seasonal schedules, conflict resolution protocols, enforcement mechanisms. They created a model that both communities could live with because both communities had equal voice in creating it. When the agreement was signed, witnessed by the territorial militia, documented by Crow, who'd traveled to cover the story, blessed by Apache elders and settler clergy alike, Nathan and Tala stood together watching two communities begin the hard work of partnership. Another map completed, Nathan said. Another future built. Tala agreed. Then she turned to him, her obsidian eyes reflecting the canyon sunset. And now, mapmaker, I believe we have a personal future to discuss. They walked into the canyon away from the celebrating communities until they found a quiet overlook where the Colorado River carved its ancient path through stone. The same place Tala told him where the first woman and first man of Apache legend had finally turned to face each other fully. 3 seasons, Nathan said. 3 demonstrations of character, capability, commitment. Have I proven myself? You've proven more than I dared hope for, Tala said. You've shown me that partnership without possession is possible, that a man can stand beside a woman as an equal, neither above nor below, that love doesn't require surrender, just the courage to be vulnerable with someone worthy of that vulnerability. She reached into her pouch and pulled out 3 items, laying them on the rock between them. In Apache tradition, when the woman accepts the man's demonstrations, she offers 3 gifts in return. Not demonstrations, gifts. Things that represent what she brings to the union. The first item was a knife, not her fighting blade, but a smaller, beautifully crafted knife with a handle carved from bone. This represents protection. I will protect you. Our partnership, our future. Not because you're weak, but because partnership means guarding what matters to both of us. The second item was a small leather pouch filled with seeds. This represents growth. I will tend our relationship like a garden, nurturing it, helping it flourish, giving it what it needs to become more than either of us could cultivate alone. The third item was a small silver compass, and Nathan recognized it immediately. It was his own compass, the one he'd thought lost during their desperate flight from Doak's men. This represents guidance. I will help you find your way when you're lost, just as you've helped me find mine. And when we're both lost, we'll use this together to find our way home. Nathan's eyes stung with tears. You've had my compass all along. I found it that night we hid in the caves. I was going to return it, but then I thought maybe it was a sign. Maybe you'd left part of yourself with me, and I was meant to keep it safe until we were ready to share everything. She pressed the compass into his palm. We're ready now, Nathan. I'm ready. Nathan pulled out his own offering, a single item he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for this moment. It was a map, hand-drawn with all his skill, showing the territory they'd traveled together. But instead of elevation lines and geological markers, it was decorated with symbols, the auction square where they met, the cave, where they first slept beside each other, the plateau, where they faced down corruption, the courthouse where justice prevailed, the burial ground where Tala had sung the dead into protection. "This is the map of us," Nathan said. "Every place we've been, every choice we've made, every moment that built what we have now. It's not complete. There's blank space for all the territory we haven't explored yet, all the future we'll map together, if you'll have me." Tala traced the map with trembling fingers, tears streaming down her face, the first tears Nathan had ever seen her shed. "The small mapmaker with the giant heart," she whispered. "Yes, yes, to everything. To partnership, to marriage, to mapping every possible future together." Nathan kissed her as the sun set over Canyon de Chelly, as the river carved its eternal path below, as the future they'd fought for spread out in every direction. When they parted, both were crying and laughing, overwhelmed by the simple miracle of having found each other in a world that had tried so hard to keep them apart. They returned to Red Butte 3 weeks later, and the wedding that followed became the stuff of legend. Apache traditions woven with territorial customs blessings. In 2 languages, witnesses from every community they'd touched. Sheriff Cade stood as Nathan's best man, his weathered face proud. Tala's grandmother performed the Apache blessing while Maria handled the territorial legal requirements because, of course, they needed their partnership documented in both spiritual and legal terms. Crow published a special edition of the Gazette with the headline, "The Pike Protocol Comes Home, Partnership in Life as in Land." Mrs. Ashworth attended with gifts that included a permanent consulting contract and a house on the edge of Red Butte, small but perfect, with room for survey equipment and a stable for Compass, who'd earned retirement. Swiftwater was there now, apprenticing as a surveyor, and already showing Nathan's precision combined with Tala's instinct for land knowledge. Private Morrison attended in his new uniform. He'd been promoted to sergeant and transferred to a unit focused on protecting rather than persecuting indigenous communities. Even the workers from the rail line came, the same men who'd refused to dig through burial grounds, bringing gifts of tools and materials to help Nathan and Tala build whatever came next. As the celebration continued into the night, Nathan and Tala slipped away to the small rise where they'd first declared their intentions 3 seasons ago. The desert spread before them, vast and infinite with possibility. "What happens now?" Nathan asked. "We've resolved the land dispute, completed the rail line, brought criminals to justice, gotten married. What's left to map?" Tala smiled, her hand resting on her belly, in a gesture Nathan had noticed growing more frequent. "Well, mapmaker, I'd say we have about 6 months to figure out how to map parenthood, because apparently partnership creates more than just peace treaties and rail routes." Nathan's mind went blank, then exploded with joy. We're going to be parents," Tala confirmed. "Probably should have mentioned it before the wedding, but I wanted to be sure. Maria confirmed it yesterday. We're building a family, Nathan, mapping a future that includes someone who'll carry forward everything we've fought for." Nathan pulled her close, his hand joining hers on her belly, feeling the beginning of a new life they'd created together. A child who'll know both worlds, who'll be taught to survey with precision and read the land with Apache wisdom, who'll grow up understanding that respect and partnership are the foundations of everything. A child who'll never doubt their worth. Tala added, her voice fierce with protective love. Who'll never be told they're less because of their heritage or their size or their choices. Who'll know from the moment they draw breath that they're loved completely and without condition. They stood together as stars wheeled overhead, mapping a future that suddenly included more than they'd imagined. Behind them, Red Butte celebrated their union. Ahead, 6 months until a new life joined their partnership, and between them, a love built on respect, choice, and the radical belief that standing together made everything possible. The story could have ended there, with marriage, with pregnancy, with victory complete and justice served. But life, Nathan was learning, wasn't about endings. It was about beginnings that grew from what came before. 6 months later, on a spring morning when the desert bloomed with unlikely flowers, Tala gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah Running Deer Pike Sarah, for Nathan's mother who'd taught him about choice running deer, for Tala's cousin whose justice had started everything. Maria delivered the baby in the house that partnership had built, with Tala's grandmother singing blessings, and Nathan's hands shaking as he held his daughter for the first time. She was perfect, Tala's dark eyes and Nathan's stubborn chin, a physical map of their unlikely union. As Nathan cradled Sarah, watching Tala rest with the exhausted peace of someone who'd brought new life into the world, he thought about maps and territories, about the routes they'd traveled, and the ones still to come. They'd mapped justice when corruption seemed inevitable. They'd mapped partnership when possession was the norm. They'd mapped love when survival had seemed like the only possible goal. And now they were mapping parenthood, teaching a new generation. That choice was sacred. That respect was foundational. That partnership between equals could change the world. Swiftwater visited that afternoon, bringing gifts from the surveying apprentices Tala had trained. "She's beautiful," Swiftwater said, looking at baby Sarah with eyes that held hard-won hope. "You two did this, showed us that survival could become living, that being hunted could transform into being honored, that the small and the silenced could stand up and change everything." "We showed each other," Nathan corrected. "Every person who stood up when it mattered, who chose courage over comfort, who believed partnership was possible, they all mapped this future. We just happened to be the ones holding the instruments." As the sun set on that spring day, Nathan and Tala sat together on their porch, Sarah sleeping between them, watching the desert that had witnessed their transformation. The rail line ran in the distance, following the route they'd proven was possible. Towns were growing along that route, built on the Pike Protocol's foundation of respect and partnership. And in Washington, Congress was debating legislation to protect sacred sites and require indigenous consultation for all territorial development legislation, inspired by two unlikely partners who'd refused to accept that exploitation was inevitable. "We've mapped something worth inheriting," Tala said quietly, her hand finding Nathan's. "Something Sarah will build on, improve, expand. The world's changing, Nathan, because we chose to change it." "Because we chose each other," Nathan corrected. "Because a tall Apache warrior taught a small cartographer that courage comes in all sizes, and that standing together multiplies strength rather than dividing it." Tala smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And because a stubborn mapmaker taught a scarred survivor that healing is possible, that love doesn't require surrender, and that the best partnerships are built on choice, freely given and joyfully accepted." They sat together as stars emerged, as the desert breathed its ancient rhythms, as their daughter slept the peaceful sleep of someone born into a world slightly better than the one her parents had inherited. The revolution they'd started in an auction square continued spreading through territories and territories beyond, carried by every person who'd witnessed their partnership and dared to believe that respect could triumph over possession. Nathan Pike and Tala Redbird had mapped more than rail routes and land surveys. They'd mapped a future where choice was sacred, where partnership was possible, where love, built on respect, could transform not just two lives, but countless lives that followed. And as they held their daughter, watching the vast desert horizon, where so much had been fought for and won, they knew their story wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first chapter of a legacy measured not in conquered territory, but in liberated hearts, not in dominated land, but in respected ground, not in possession, but in partnership freely chosen and fiercely protected. The dust and the choice had led them here. The lowly cowboy and the mighty woman had become partners, parents, pioneers of a better way. And the map they'd drawn together with lines of respect, markers of courage, and a legend that read, "Your choice always," would guide generations yet to come. Their revolution was complete. Their love was flourishing. Their legacy was just beginning. And in the warm desert night, holding their daughter between them, Nathan and Tala knew with absolute certainty that every desperate choice, every courageous stand, every vulnerable moment of trust had been worth it. They had mapped justice. They had built partnership. They had chosen love. And the territory ahead, infinite, challenging, beautiful, was theirs to explore together, one choice at a time, always.